Chapter 173. When he woke up in the morning, Zhang Xiaohu opened his eyes and saw an infinitely magnified face staring at him seriously. The corners of that face still had some excrement. Zhang Xiaohu was so scared that he didn't see who it was and hurriedly hid behind. When he was far away, he realized that it was his younger brother, Zhang Xiaohua. He was holding his chin and looking at him with a playful expression. Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly touched his face and rubbed his eyes. He asked, "Is there something on my face?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "There isn't anything on your face, but there is on your mouth." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he couldn't help but touch his mouth. He said in surprise, "How is that possible?" Zhang Xiaohua didn't directly answer his question. Instead, she said, "Second brother, what did you dream of yesterday?" Dream? Zhang Xiaohu slightly frowned and said, "No, I didn't dream of anything." "Hee, you haven't dreamed yet." Zhang Xiaohua said with a mischievous smile, "If you didn't dream, why did I hear you call someone's name?" "Who? Whose name? How come I don't know?" Zhang Xiaohu was still confused. His dream was vague, how could he remember so much? When Zhang Xiaohua heard that her second brother didn't admit it, she stood up and looked at the sunlight outside the window. She said seriously, "That's strange. This morning, someone in his dream called, 'Junior Marshal Sister Chang'e, Junior Marshal Sister Chang'e.' Could it be me?" Zhang Xiaohu's face suddenly turned red. He couldn't help but mutter, This, is it true?" Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, "The ancients said that a gentle and graceful woman is a good match for a gentleman." "It's nothing." Zhang Xiaohu's face turned red. He also didn't know what to say. Then, he thought for a moment, clenched his teeth, and asked, Xiaohua, are you familiar with Junior Marshal Sister Chang'e?" Zhang Xiaohua tilted her head and thought for a moment before replying, "I don't know anyone that well. It's just that when I went out with the Manor Lord last time, we went together. We didn't talk much and just got acquainted with each other." "Oh, I see." Zhang Xiaohu was a little disappointed. Zhang Xiaohua blinked her eyes and said with a smile, "Although I'm not familiar with Junior Sister Chang'e, I'm very familiar with Hall Master Qin of Mingsue Hall." "Really?" Zhang Xiaohu was overjoyed, his eyes shining with hope. "Of course." Zhang Xiaohua declined to comment. After the two brothers finished their meal, Zhang Xiaohu was familiar with his younger brother's poor sense of direction. Since he had nothing to do anyway, he followed him to Kitty Hawk Hall. Just as they arrived at the main road in front of the hall, they ran into two acquaintances. It was Shengguan Yun and Yu Dei. Both of them didn't look good and were in the middle of whispering something. Zhang Xiaohu had already heard from Zhang Xiaohua last night, so he wasn't surprised to run into them here. He very naturally stepped forward and saluted them. Shengguan Yun and Yu Dei didn't neglect him either. They had already lost their arrogance at the Lotus Escort Agency and hurriedly returned the salute. Zhang Xiaohu knew that the two's performance yesterday wouldn't be ideal, so he didn't ask any questions. After exchanging greetings for a while, he went in. It wasn't easy for the two to run into Zhang Xiaohu, so how could he be willing to let them go? Leaving Zhang Xiaohua aside, he pulled on Zhang Xiaohu's sleeve and asked him about his recent situation. He also expressed his respect for him. Only then did he ask in a roundabout way how he had caught the discerning eyes of gang leader O. Zhang Xiaohu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He only answered perfunctorily, how could he be willing to tell the truth? Zhang Xiaohua, the instigator, was squeezed outside by the two. She was all smiles as she watched the two's performance. After talking for a while, Zhang Xiaohu coughed twice and said, "My two dear friends, it's already late. Why don't you hurry inside and make your preparations? There will be a competition in a while. Although you don't need to advance, this is a hard-won opportunity. You should cherish it and exchange pointers with my sect's disciples. It will be very beneficial for your future martial arts progress." Shengguan Yun smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Zhang is wrong. I didn't know before. If I had known that the martial arts competition would be so difficult, I wouldn't have come back even if you beat me to death. Yesterday, I fought 3 rounds, but I didn't win a single one. I don't know where my face has gone. To tell the truth, if it wasn't for brother Yu holding me back, I would have returned to the Lotus Escort Agency yesterday. Yu Dei smiled and said, perhaps the strength of yesterday's opponent was too strong? Wouldn't it be even more unsightly if you were to withdraw after just 3 rounds? Let's wait and see today. Maybe there will be a change today. Shen Guanyun curled his lips and said, forget it. If I ran, then I ran. Who said anything about me? I didn't know either. What is there to lose face about? If I were to be thrown out of the ring by those little kids today, that would be the real shame. Zhang Xiaohu heard the two say this and was even more worried for Zhang Xiaohua. When he looked back, Zhang Xiaohua was looking around and didn't seem to care. He couldn't help but laugh at himself. This little brother of his had encountered many setbacks on the road of martial arts. Being thrown out of the ring was a small matter that he probably wouldn't take to heart. Under the urging of Zhang Xiaohu, the 2 martial arts masters of the Lotus Escort Agency whose self-esteem had been greatly damaged yesterday walked into the Young Eagle Hall step by step. As usual, the entrance of the Young Eagle Hall was guarded. Zhang Xiaohua and the other 2 all had number plates. Zhang Xiaohua didn't need to be said. Although she was much older than the disciples of the Young Eagle Hall, her height was about the same. The guards weren't good enough to see her age, so they passed after checking. Yu Dei and Shen Guanyun didn't look like disciples of the Young Eagle Hall at all. The guards naturally wouldn't let them in. Yu Dei could only tell them their identities. Fortunately, some of the guards knew about this matter that hadn't happened for decades, so they let them in. This small disturbance made Yu Dei and Shen Guanyun's expressions very unhappy. Zhang Xiaohu showed his waist token. When the guard saw the genuine waist token, he was flabbergasted. Where did this junior brother come from? Why didn't he compete at his own place during the martial arts exhibition? Why did he come to the Young Eagle Hall to watch the show? If he wanted to watch the show, then wouldn't the big arena at the entrance of the meeting hall be 100 times more lively? However, looking at the 2 foreign contestants who were much taller and older than the disciples of the Young Eagle Hall, he more or less understood what was going on. When he entered the Kitty Hawk Hall, he saw that the square was filled with children's heads. Zhang Xiaohu could not help but laugh. What he saw was just a few people sparring, and he already felt a sense of fear. Facing so many children whose martial arts were much higher than his, if he did not have a thick heart, it would not be easy to face them. Yu Dei and Shen Guanyun's thoughts were understandable. The 3 people's arenas weren't together, so Zhang Xiaohu naturally accompanied Zhang Xiaohua. The 4 people walked for a while and then cupped their hands in farewell. When Zhang Xiaohua arrived in front of her arena, team leader Chang and the others were almost all present. Zhang Xiaohu was afraid that his brother would make a mistake, so he went forward to greet the 2 team leaders and explained his identity. When the 2 team leaders heard that he was the direct disciple of the sect leader, they didn't dare to be negligent and quickly cupped their hands in return. In their hearts, they thought at the same time, inside story, there must be inside story. Zhang Xiaohu and the others naturally knew that he had entered the ethereal sect through nepotism. But today, he had accompanied his younger brother who knew the ethereal steps to the Kitty Hawk Hall. Anyone would have thought that there might be some unspoken rules involved. Zhang Xiaohu didn't know that the 2 opposite him had thought so much in the blink of an eye. He sincerely explained to the 2 team leaders that Zhang Xiaohua had gone to look for him yesterday. He hadn't seen his brother for a long time, so he stayed to talk for a while. Because of the delay, he didn't ask for the room's location, so he could only stay at his place. He asked the 2 team leaders to bear with him. When the 2 team leaders saw this, they laughed in their hearts. How could they not sell such a cheap favor? They roughly explained the rules of the martial arts exhibition. It turned out that the rules of the martial arts exhibition were that many people came to the Lotus Escort Agency in Huanxi Manor. The Misty School usually arranged food and lodging, but these two places weren't very far from the Misty Mountain Villa. Many people were still willing to return to their own residences. Therefore, the martial arts exhibition didn't restrict those who had to stay at the Misty Mountain Villa. Even if Zhang Xiaohua had returned to the Huanxi Manor last night, it was still possible. But today, no one would go to the Huanxi Manor to pick him up. He had to arrive at the Young Eagle Hall on time, or else he would be disqualified. When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, his heart was relieved. Zhang Xiaohua beside him was overjoyed and said, "That's great. Then tonight we'll go to the medicine hall to look for team leader He and the others." Zhang Xiaohu glared fiercely at him and said, "It won't be too late to talk about it after you win. If you still don't win, how can you face team leader He?" Zhang Xiaohua shrunk his neck and stuck out his little tongue, pretending to be afraid. Not long after, the second day of the martial arts exhibition officially began. According to the order of the number plates that had been arranged long ago, they went on stage one by one. Zhang Xiaohu suddenly asked, "Xiaohua, what's your number plate?" Zhang Xiaohua raised his number plate and said with a smile, "Number 250. Zhang Xiaohu curled his lips and secretly said in his heart, "This number is really 250. Then he asked again, "What about you Dei and Shangguanyun?" Zhang Xiaohua said without hesitation, "Number 2, and number 111. Zhang Xiaohu nodded. "He, how many numbers, really 2? On the stage, the two children's fists and feet created wind as they fought. The thrilling scene made Zhang Xiaohu stunned. Was this still the martial arts of children who weren't even 10 years old? Why was it so much more powerful than the last time he saw it? However, after thinking for a bit, he understood. The fighting outside the stage was just to compare notes on martial arts. It didn't involve any benefits. Many of the unique skills and dangerous moves might not be used. But this martial arts exhibition competition really wanted to see the level of your martial arts. If he didn't show it now, when would he show it? Therefore, even if it wasn't a life and death battle, they would still go all out and not give in the slightest. The time it took for a stick of incense to burn passed quickly. The two people on the stage fought to a draw. Both of them were unconvinced and jumped off the stage, each taking 1 point. Zhang Xiaohua's number was at the end, so just like yesterday, his match was also at the end of each round. So he also stood beside Zhang Xiaohu and watched the competition on the stage. He didn't know how Zhang Xiaohua felt. Anyway, it wasn't just the first match. In the following 7 matches, there were wins and losses, but every match made Zhang Xiaohu feel relaxed and happy. The martial arts of these children were difficult for him to reach. It could be imagined that the depth of the bench of this Misty School was very deep. Then he thought of the time when he and his younger brother rashly came to the Misty Mountain Villa to learn martial arts. At that time, he really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Looking at the children in front of him and thinking of himself at that time, how could they accept him? At the same time, he felt ashamed of his inferiority and looked at Zhang Xiaohua who was watching the competition attentively. His heart was filled with endless warmth. If it wasn't for his younger brother who he watched grow up from a baby boy, how could he enter the Misty School with such a high threshold? If he couldn't learn profound martial arts and gain a place in the Misty School where experts were everywhere, how could he face his younger brother? Suddenly, that shame was beaten away by his pride. He didn't have time to participate in the past of the Misty School, but the future of the Misty School was in front of him. He might as well give up his inferiority complex and shame, and use his blood and sweat in exchange for unlimited hope in the future. Just as he was thinking, he heard Captain Chang call out, 250, come on stage. Zhang Xiaohu's heart skipped a beat. His younger brother was going to go on stage, but he didn't hold any hope in his heart. How could Zhang Xiaohua be a match for a competition that even he felt ashamed of his inferiority? Thinking of Zhang Xiaohua's embarrassment yesterday, he thought that he would be thrown off the stage not long after going on stage. Thus, Zhang Xiaohu moved his feet, preparing to find a good place to catch Zhang Xiaohua who would be thrown off the stage. But before he moved, he saw that Zhang Xiaohua beside him didn't move either. He couldn't help but say curiously, "Xiaohua, they're calling your number. It's your turn to go on stage." At this time, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have just made up her mind. She turned around with a bright face and said with a smile, "Second brother, come over and help me with something." Zhang Xiaohu asked curiously, "Help? What can I help you with? Don't tell me you want me to help you go on stage." Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly waved his hand. Not to mention whether Kitty Hawk Hall was willing or not, even if they agreed, he couldn't go up and embarrass himself. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "I'm not asking you to go on stage. I'm asking you to help me get on stage." "Help you get on stage?" Zhang Xiaohu was a little puzzled, but when he saw Zhang Xiaohua's opponent use a beautiful qinggong to leap onto the stage, he suddenly understood. With such a high stage, if no one helped, Zhang Xiaohua really wouldn't be able to go up. Zhang Xiaohu asked, "Then how can I help you? How did you go up yesterday?" Zhang Xiaohua looked askance at the two team leaders and said, "Yesterday, Captain Chang threw me up. The first time, he actually threw me to the other side of the stage. Today, I can't let him help me. Second brother, help me. Just use your strength to throw me up." "Use my strength?" Zhang Xiaohu was greatly embarrassed. "Brother, you're my blood-related brother. You can't harm people like this. You know that my internal strength isn't good, but you still want me to help you. Aren't you making me lose face? You could have just let the team leader throw me, why did you change the rules?" Seeing that Zhang Xiaohu still didn't move, Zhang Xiaohua was a little anxious. She tugged on his sleeve and said, "It's okay, second brother. You can just throw me. Even if you throw me like yesterday, I won't blame you." Zhang Xiaohu had no choice but to bite his ear and explain the situation. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she frowned and said in the same voice, "So it's like this, second brother. So your internal strength hasn't reached that level yet. What should I do?" Zhang Xiaohu was so angry that he almost wanted to cover Zhang Xiaohua's mouth with one hand and choke him to death with the other. "Can't you be a little quieter? Can't you see that when I'm talking to you, I'm leaning close to your ear?" Zhang Xiaohua didn't care about other people's gazes. After thinking for a bit, she said, "How about this, second brother? Do you still remember when we used to steal bird eggs when we were young?" Zhang Xiaohu was even more anxious. "Why are you talking about stealing bird eggs now?" He said in a bad mood, "I remember." "What about it?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Then it's just like before. Can't I just stand on your shoulder?" Zhang Xiaohu rolled his eyes at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "No. Can't I ask the team leader to go easy on you again?" Zhang Xiaohua stubbornly shook her head. Zhang Xiaohu saw that he couldn't win against her and could only accompany her to the front of the stage. The stage was about the height of a person. Zhang Xiaohua stood on Zhang Xiaohu's shoulder and her hands just happened to be placed on the edge of the stage. She only saw Zhang Xiaohua's hands exerting force and her small figure flew into the air with a peng sound. She then flipped a few hollow somersaults in the air before floating down to the ground. Zhang Xiaohua, this brat, had the intention of showing off. What a joke. This young master didn't know qinggong. But this qinggong movement and qinggong techniques had been learned for 2 days. If she didn't use them, wouldn't others look down on her? Zhang Xiaohua's qinggong came from the ethereal steps. She also wanted to show off. Her posture was naturally graceful and elegant. When this brat leisurely landed on the ground, the crowd came back to their senses and thought, "What are you doing?" If you had used your qinggong from below the stage, everyone would have clapped their hands and praised you. However, looking at Zhang Xiaohu, who was gloomily walking back to the stage and trying to find a good angle to catch Zhang Xiaohua, how could they still praise you? Zhang Xiaohua closed her eyes and waited for a long time. Not hearing the sound of clapping, she was very puzzled. At this time, she heard the child opposite her say, "This senior brother, are you feeling unwell?" You've already closed your eyes for a long time. Zhang Xiaohua opened her eyes gloomily. It seemed that the performance just now was a waste. No one appreciated it. Her song was too high to be deceived. So she said in a bad mood, "Can't you see that I'm resting? Wait a moment more." In fact, team leader Chang, who was below the stage, had the same thoughts as him. The only difference was that team leader Chang thought, this ethereal steps movement technique is so miraculous. Even a person who has never practiced Qigong can move so gracefully. If I were to practice it, what would happen? He narrowed his eyes and looked at Zhang Xiaohu, who was not far away. He thought, this brat actually did not practice any internal cultivation technique. I wonder what kind of divine martial arts he practiced. Looks like I should have a good relationship with him. Team leader Chang saw Zhang Xiaohu's unnatural expression and his eyes moved. He pulled over a disciple who had just competed and whispered a few words to him. That disciple was puzzled. He turned back to look at Zhang Xiaohua on the stage and quickly ran away. As for Zhang Xiaohu, he waited for Zhang Xiaohua to step on his shoulder and onto the stage before he slowly left the stage. He stole a glance at the people below the stage who had an expression of, "We don't know this person." He secretly wiped the sweat on his forehead. Sigh, how embarrassing. Luckily there weren't many people here. Just as he was thinking, he heard someone beside him say, "Senior brother Zhang Xiaohu, what were you doing just now? Please add it to your collection, thank you." Chapter 174. What he was afraid of would come. As soon as Zhang Xiaohu heard this voice, he immediately shouted in his heart, "Oh no! How could he let this person see his embarrassment? What should he do?" While he was thinking, the person had come to his side. It was his junior sister Chang'e, whom he had just met last night. Chang'e was still dressed in tight clothes and looked valiant. Beside her, there was a petite girl with big round eyes and a round face with baby fat, which made people want to love her. At this moment, the round eyes that could speak were staring at Zhang Xiaohu strangely, with a doubtful expression. Zhang Xiaohu wanted to make up a lie, but facing Chang'e's face, he couldn't tell a lie at all. In fact, Zhang Xiaohu forgot that in this square full of children, many people had seen his actions. Chang'e had seen it carefully from a distance, so it would be troublesome if he lied. Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and then said frankly, "It's nothing. I'm helping my brother to get on the ring." The round-faced girl asked softly, "Do you need help to get on the ring? Can't you just jump up with light skills?" Zhang Xiaohu looked at Zhang Xiaohua, who had just stood on the ring, and said, "My brother doesn't know light skills." The round-faced girl said again, "Nonsense. You saw his posture when he just turned over and got on the ring. How can he not know light skills? Besides, that night by the river, he..." Her words were really ambiguous. Zhang Xiaohu couldn't help narrowing his eyes. Was this his brother's acquaintance? At this time, Chang'e hurriedly interrupted the girl's words and said, "Chen Chen." The round-faced Chen Chen seemed to realize that she had let the cat out of the bag. She couldn't help but stick out her tongue and cover her mouth with her hand. Her expression was strange. Chang'e then introduced, "Senior brother, this is my junior sister. Her name is Chen Chen. She went out with Hall Master Qin last time." Oh. Zhang Xiaohu suddenly realized that this was also one of the companions who went south with Zhang Xiaohua. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohu cupped his fists and said, "Junior sister Chen Chen, I'm Zhang Xiaohu, Zhang Xiaohua's second brother." Chen Chen hurriedly cupped her fists and said, "I'm Chen Chen. Greetings, senior brother." Then, she asked in disbelief, "Zhang Xiaohua, do you really not know Qigong?" Zhang Xiaohu bitterly smiled and said, "Yes, he really doesn't know Qigong. Yesterday, he was thrown up on stage by Captain Chang using his internal strength." As soon as Zhang Xiaohu finished speaking, he regretted it. Why was he so talkative? He should have just said that he did not know Qigong. Why did he have to explain what happened yesterday? Sure enough, When Chen Chen heard this, he immediately said, "Senior brother, then why don't you use your internal strength to throw him up?" What he was afraid of really happened. Zhang Xiaohu was a little embarrassed and said with a red face, "Well, my internal strength is not good enough, so I can't throw him up." Chen Chen was even more puzzled and said, "Senior brother, you seem to be lying. You are older than us and have practiced internal strength longer than us. You can't be so weak that you can't even do this." "I can do this." Zhang Xiaohu was embarrassed and was about to explain when Chang'e beside him said, "Chen Chen, shut your mouth. No one will know that you are mute if you don't speak. If you ask again, I'll let you go back to Mingsue Hall now. In the future, I won't take you out. Brine and tofu, everything has its vanquisher." Chen Chen immediately shut her mouth and looked like an obedient child. Zhang Xiaohu's eyes were full of tears. What a bosom friend. She came to his rescue at the right time. If she asked again, he did not know how to answer. The more he looked at Chang'e, the more he liked her. She was really a considerate girl. Chang'e smiled at Zhang Xiaohu and said apologetically, "Senior brother, junior sister Chen Chen is like this. She likes to get to the bottom of things. I hope you don't mind." Zhang Xiaohu waved his hand repeatedly, indicating that he did not mind. But then, Chang'e asked again, "Just now, Zhang Xiaohua's posture of stepping on your shoulder looked very skillful. I guess you must have been a human ladder for your younger brother a lot, right?" When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he chuckled and told Chang'e about how the two brothers went to the woods together to dig out bird eggs when they were young. Chang'e listened with curiosity and yearning in her eyes. Beside her, Chen Chen's little face was also red and she was eager to ask something. It was pitiful to say that although the disciples of the Misty School, such as Chang'e, were all favored by God and enjoyed the wealth of the world and the excellent treatment, their lives were mainly about practicing martial arts. However, they had no chance to enjoy the interesting things of Zhang Xiaohua's childhood. How could Zhang Xiaohu's description not arouse the curiosity of Chang'e and Chen Chen? Zhang Xiaohu was talking and suddenly stopped. He thought of something and quickly turned back. Sure enough, on the arena, Zhang Xiaohua had already fought with her opponent. Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly said, "Junior sister Chang'e, let's not talk about other things first. After Xiaohua's competition, let's talk about it." Chang'e also hurriedly said, "Okay, senior brother, let's watch Zhang Xiaohua's competition first." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and then said, "Well, junior sister, you stay here and I'll go over there." Chang'e was surprised and asked, "Why don't you stay together?" Zhang Xiaohu said, "You stay here and I'll stay there. If Xiaohua is knocked off the arena, we can catch him. He doesn't know Qing Gong and I'm afraid that he will fall and break." Knocked off the arena? Chang'e was very surprised and said, "How is that possible? I've seen Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts. Even if he was lucky to meet her last time as he said, he should be able to defeat a child in plain clothes. Impossible." Zhang Xiaohu said firmly, "Yesterday, he said that he didn't win a single match. He must be embarrassed to say that because he was knocked off the arena." Seeing that the other's point of view was too different from theirs, they didn't know who to listen to. At this time, Chen Chen waved her hand aside, indicating that she had something to say. Chang'e nodded angrily and said, "If you have something to say it quickly. Don't be long-winded. Let's see Zhang Xiaohua's performance in the arena first and then decide what to do." Chen Chen finished her words in one breath and then closed her mouth tightly. Zhang Xiaohu and Chang'e listened and nodded. They looked at each other and then looked at the arena. On the arena, Zhang Xiaohua was fighting fiercely with his opponent, and it was ridiculous. Yesterday, Zhang Xiaohua's opponent in the first round was Mu Tangchun. His internal strength was the best among the 9 children. According to him, yesterday, he used all his internal strength in the last 3 punches without any reservation. But even so, he didn't gain any advantage against Zhang Xiaohua. Moreover, when he was talking with these friends last night, he repeatedly emphasized that Zhang Xiaohua's strength was not limited to this. He felt that Zhang Xiaohua still had at least 30% of his strength. This news was also confirmed by the other two children who fought with Zhang Xiaohua. Every time they fought with Zhang Xiaohua, their arms would be numb and their wrists would be sore because of Zhang Xiaohua. Therefore, today, when they fought with Zhang Xiaohua, they used 100% of their strength to fight with him. But as long as Zhang Xiaohua really used 100% of his strength to fight with them, they would immediately dodge. Therefore, on the arena, it was funny again. First of all, unlike Zhang Xiaohu's imagination, Zhang Xiaohua didn't have any strength to fight back. On the arena, Zhang Xiaohua and his opponent exchanged punches and kicks, and the fight was very lively. Even when Zhang Xiaohua was angry and used all of his strength to fight with his opponent would dodge and not take it head-on. Of course, it was also not what Chang'e imagined. Zhang Xiaohua was a wolf who could take advantage of everything. Although Zhang Xiaohua's strength was great and his fists were hard, his moves were limited and couldn't be compared to the Misty School's disciples. However, he also had his own way of defense. Whenever his opponent's moves were ingenious and he couldn't deal with it, Zhang Xiaohua would use ethereal steps to dodge and make his opponent miss all of his moves. As a result, there was such a funny situation on the arena. Whenever his opponent forced Zhang Xiaohua into a dead end, his opponent would immediately use lightness skill to dodge easily. And whenever Zhang Xiaohua was forced into a dead end by his opponent's ingenious moves, he would immediately use ethereal steps to dodge easily. As a result, when the time for an incense stick to burn was up, the two of them were still tied. This was the first time Chang'e and Chen Chen had seen such a bizarre and hilarious situation. They were truly astonished. Their faces were full of wonder and their hearts were filled with questions. Although the young man's fist technique was experienced and his footwork was profound, there was no internal force surging between his moves. His moves were also repetitive. If they went forward with a sword, they would certainly take his life within a few moves. Was this young man the same Zhang Xiaohua who saved many lives in the dark of night and killed a martial arts master with a single move? Zhang Xiaohu was even more incredulous. How was this possible? How could he not know Zhang Xiaohua's level as his brother? Last year, he was still recuperating in his room in the escort agency. His finger bones were shattered by Yu Dai's internal force. How could he be so powerful after not seeing him for a few days? Although Zhang Xiaohu was not good at martial arts, he had learned with Yu Dai in the martial arts training center in the escort agency. Naturally, he was aware of Yu Dai's level. None of these children in the Misty School were worse than Yu Dai. How could his brother, Zhang Xiaohua, be on par with them? Was this young man still his younger brother who stood on his shoulder and dug out bird eggs when they were young? When Zhang Xiaohua lightly jumped down from the arena and went to greet Chang'e, the three of them came back to their senses. Chang'e looked at Zhang Xiaohua as if he had just woken up from a dream and quickly introduced Chen Chen. Chen Chen had gone to the south with Zhang Xiaohua, so Zhang Xiaohua naturally remembered her. However, at that time, Chen Chen was a female disciple of Mingcue Hall and followed to protect Dou Yan. How could she meet Zhang Xiaohua, who was like a servant? At this time, seeing her here, Zhang Xiaohua was also happy and quickly went forward to greet her. Chen Chen's eyes were full of stars and her face was red. She shyly cupped her hands and saluted, but she also closed her mouth tightly and did not speak. There was a reason for Chen Chen's reverence. Imagine that night, Chen Chen was also by Chang'e's side and stabbed the old man in black. Chen Chen's long sword also stabbed the old man's body, but it could not penetrate the old man's body. Instead, the old man grabbed the long sword and broke the tip of the sword. Zhang Xiaohua, when everyone was in despair, stepped forward and stabbed the old man's throat with one sword, saving Dou Yan and everyone else. Although it was dark and Chen Chen could not see it clearly, the fact was that it happened in front of her. How could such a heroic act not arouse the reverence of girls? Chang'e saw this and said with a smile, "Chen Chen, you can speak now." Hearing this, Chen Chen did not immediately chatter like a baby swallow as Chang'e expected. Instead, she closed her mouth and smiled without saying a word. Zhang Xiaohu did not notice this. After seeing Zhang Xiaohua come over and salute Chang'e and Qin Chen, he pulled Zhang Xiaohua and asked, "Xiaohua, when did you become so powerful? Isn't that the boxing skill you put together by yourself? Why don't others dare to fight with you? And what's the footwork you used to dodge?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Second brother, don't you know what I am like? Didn't we also learn from each other last night? But now I am very strong, while they are still young and lack internal force, so they dare not fight with me directly. As for the footwork, you can ask Hero Wen about it later." Chang'e next to them was not happy and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, you are not kind. It's just a footwork. Can't you tell us?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and whispered, "Master O doesn't allow me to tell you. You can figure it out by yourselves." Hearing this, Chang'e and Qin Chen immediately stopped smiling and did not dare to ask more. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua quickly whispered, "Sister Chang'e, you can ask Hall Master Qin about this when you have a chance. She also knows it." Chang'e and Qin Chen looked at each other and nodded. Zhang Xiaohua then asked, "Sister Chang'e, why did you come so early today? I thought you would come in the afternoon." Chang'e said with a smile, "This year, I'm going to take part in the competition of the 7th rank in plain clothes. The number of female disciples in Mingsue Hall is limited and there are not many competitions. Yesterday, I basically got the points to advance and won another round this morning. I'm sure I can advance, so I asked for leave from Hall Master. Hall Master Qin heard that I was going to watch your competition and readily agreed. You see, Qin Chen also pestered me and insisted on coming." Qin Chen blushed and said, "I just want to see how powerful you are. It was dark last time, so I didn't see clearly." Zhang Xiaohua was amused and asked, "Are you disappointed when you see me today?" Qin Chen was straightforward and said, "Yes, it seems that you can't even defeat me, a 5th rank commoner." Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "It's true. It was a coincidence that day. It's true." At this time, Zhang Xiaohu's face was a little abnormal. He thought a lot in his mind, Chang'e looks younger than me, but now she is already at the 7th rank of commoner clothes. But I haven't practiced the mental cultivation method of internal strength. Even if I practice the 1st rank of commoner clothes, I am no match for her. Even now, it seems that even my brother can easily defeat me. I don't know when I can catch up with Chang'e and advance to the 7th rank of commoner clothes. I think that when I reach the 7th rank of commoner clothes, Chang'e will have already advanced to brocade clothes." Chang'e saw Zhang Xiaohua and Qin Chen talking happily and couldn't help laughing. Then she noticed that Zhang Xiaohu lowered his head and didn't say anything. She felt strange and asked, "Senior brother, what are you thinking about?" Zhang Xiaohu raised his head and said with a forced smile, "Nothing. I'm just thinking about when I can take part in the martial arts exhibition and when I can advance to the 7th rank of commoner clothes. Junior sister apprentice Chang'e is so young, but her martial arts are much better than mine. I really don't know when I can catch up with you. My title of senior brother sounds really shameful." Chang'e smiled and said, "People have different experiences. If you concentrate on practicing martial arts like us, you won't have the fun of childhood that you just talked about. Since you already have such fun and still want our martial arts, what else do we have to be proud of? We have our differences and pride. This is the real life." Zhang Xiaohu understood and said, "Junior sister apprentice Chang'e said it so well. It's very philosophical." Chang'e chuckled and said, "This is what our Hall Master Qin said. I just changed it a little. Moreover, now that you've become Martial Uncle Wen's disciple, you should concentrate on practicing martial arts. You'll get something in the future if you work hard." Zhang Xiaohu nodded and said, "You're right. However, I always feel that my martial arts are not as good as yours. You call me senior brother, so I feel uneasy." Chang'e thought for a moment and said, "You're right. In fact, you always call me junior sister apprentice Chang'e. It sounds cumbersome. How about we call each other by their names?" Zhang Xiaohu clapped his hands and said, "That's good. I'll call you Chang'e. When my martial arts are as good as yours, it won't be too late to call you junior sister apprentice." Chang'e smiled and said, "Since you said so, I'll wait for the day when your martial arts catch up with mine." Zhang Xiaohu. Zhang Xiaohu nodded firmly and said, "There will be such a day. Chang'e, wait for it." While the four of them were chatting below the stage, they did not forget about the competition on the stage. Chang'e and Chen Chen had come from the first rank of commoners, so they had a unique vision. They would judge every competition and they were very appreciative of these disciples. The male and female disciples of the ethereal sect were taught separately. The young female disciples were also taught in Mingsue Hall, not Kitty Hawk Hall. Usually, Chang'e and the others rarely came to Kitty Hawk Hall, but even so, Chang'e was very optimistic about this batch of disciples. He even thought that he did not have such strength at that time. On the stage, the competition without Zhang Xiaohua was very exciting. The 8 competitions had their own characteristics. Chang'e repeatedly sighed that the new generation was better than the old. She could not compete with them at that time. Soon after noon, it was time for Zhang Xiaohua to go on the stage. This time, Chang'e was present, so there was no need for Zhang Xiaohu to be a human ladder. After discussing with Chang'e, just as Chang'e was about to throw Zhang Xiaohua onto the stage, Leader Chang came over. He stopped Chang'e's action and said to Zhang Xiaohua with a smile, "Number 250, you don't need to ask others to help you anymore. I'll ask someone to bring a ladder. You can go on the stage from the side. It's not good to be thrown here and there like this. If Steward Su sees this, he will definitely blame you." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was overjoyed. How could she not use a ladder? Who would like the feeling of being grabbed by the neck and thrown into the sky? So, she hurriedly thanked Leader Chang and went on the stage from the side ladder. Chapter 175. Zhang Xiaohua's opponent in this round seemed to be weaker than the previous rounds. He was also a little younger. In the previous rounds, he had lost more than he drew. He was probably the weakest in this group apart from Zhang Xiaohua. In the eyes of Chang'e and Chen Chen, he should be able to defeat him in a few moves. Unfortunately, the one on the field now was Zhang Xiaohua, not a female disciple of Mingsue Hall. As a result, the same situation as the previous round appeared in the competition on the field. Although the disciple of Kitty Hawk Hall was the weakest, his fist technique, palm technique, and internal force were all remarkable. The most important thing was that his lightness skill was also good. In this situation, Zhang Xiaohua could only sigh. Alas, was this the legendary saying, "Not weak when encountering the strong and not strong when encountering the weak"? Chang'e and Chen Chen had this thought in their hearts at the same time. In this case, no matter what the outcome of the competition on the field was, the result had already been decided. Apart from the time it took to burn a stick of incense, the people in the audience really could not think of any other result. Watching Zhang Xiaohua's fists on the field brutally punching here and there and his opponent using lightness skill to fly around, a phrase suddenly appeared in Chang'e's mind, "A cow chewing on a peony." Yes, a cow chewing on a peony. It was Zhang Xiaohua, this cow, chewing on the peony that was the exquisite martial arts of Misty School. The martial arts of Misty School were so wonderful. All kinds of fist techniques, palm techniques, lightness skills, and other martial arts were extraordinary, like a beautiful peony in full bloom. When facing an opponent like Zhang Xiaohua, he did not use the same moves to fight the enemy. Instead, he used his brute force and a set of fist techniques to rush forward and force the opponent to dodge everywhere. When he encountered martial arts that he could not deal with, Zhang Xiaohua only had one word, dodge. After dodging for a while, he immediately used his brute force and fist techniques to continue ravaging his opponent. This kind of barbaric competition was completely different from the competition of the other young Eagle Hall disciples. If the others were competing through the blossoming of beauty, then he was displaying his strength through ravaging and destroying this beauty. Other than a cow chewing on peony, he really couldn't think of a better word to describe Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts competition. However, Zhang Xiaohua, this bull, truly had the strength to be called a bull. The strength of her arms was indescribable. Although there weren't many moves in the Big Dipper magical fist, there were only 108 moves, but in Zhang Xiaohua's hands, the ordinary became magical. Facing the various moves and techniques of the young Eagle Hall's disciples, she countered each move with the same principle and did not fall into a disadvantageous position. In fact, Chang'e and Chen Chen thought too highly of Zhang Xiaohua in their hearts. They had seen Zhang Xiaohua's amazing sword move and naturally thought that Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts were extraordinary, but they chose to forget it. How long had Zhang Xiaohua been practicing martial arts? How long had the disciples of the Misty School's Kitty Hawk Hall been practicing martial arts? How many martial arts resources did Zhang Xiaohua have? How many martial arts resources did the disciples of the Misty School's Kitty Hawk Hall have? None of these could be compared. Because all of these, compared to the tall one and the short one and the big one and the small one in the ring, people couldn't remember. They could only feel that Zhang Xiaohua, who was taller than the others, was bullying the child opposite her. If Zhang Xiaohua won, then it should be, but if she didn't win, then it shouldn't be. Was it necessary to win just because she was older and taller? Of course not. At least, Yu Dai and Shen Guanyun, who were in the same square, weren't like this. Shen Guanyun didn't need to be mentioned. She had lost 3 matches in a row yesterday, and today's 2 matches didn't seem to have improved. As for Yu Dai, she had accumulated 1 point yesterday with 2 draws and 1 loss. She thought that she would be able to rise steadily today, but unexpectedly, she met a strong opponent as soon as she went on the stage. She also lost 2 matches in a row and even lost yesterday's points. At this time, both of them drooped their heads like ostriches and shrank in the middle of a group of children. Today's decadence was the opposite of yesterday's. Yesterday, Shen Guanyun was abnormally decadent. He felt that it was a mistake for him to come here, but after last night's sleepless night, he truly recognized his own shortcomings. Although he had practiced martial arts for a few years in his hometown, he was still a wild fox and hadn't been taught seriously by others. In the Lotus Escort Agency's martial arts training center, although he had been taught seriously, studied seriously, and practiced diligently, it had only been a short time after all. Thus, he deeply understood that his losses were normal. If he won, it would be abnormal instead. He was fully prepared for today's loss. Losing 2 or 3 matches was something he could accept. After all, he couldn't compare to the group of talented children in the Misty School. His talent and resources were lacking. Yesterday, while Yu Dai was decadent, he also had a trace of excitement. After all, it was rare for him to have the opportunity to exchange pointers with a disciple from the Misty School, even if it was a commoner first-rank disciple. Yesterday's loss was just a moment of carelessness, or he had met an expert first. After a long night of rest, he was prepared to show off his skills today and beat him into a mess. Of course, it was inappropriate to bully the weak, but for the sake of his face, he couldn't care less. However, reality had taught him a solid lesson. Today's opponent was an expert, and yesterday's was just an appetizer. Thus, the greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. Today's Yu Dai was completely listless. Since Yu Dai and Shang Guanyun had chosen the smaller accounts in the group, the 3rd round of the competition had already begun when Zhang Xiaohua had just finished the 2nd round of the competition. There was still no miracle in the 3rd round. Yu Dai persisted for more than half the round, but in the end, he was forced off the stage by a series of attacks from his opponent. Yu Dai jumped off the stage in a sorry state. Standing on the ground, he turned his head to look at the proud young man on the stage. Obviously, that wasn't his stage. The one who let his hopes soar wasn't him, but the excited young man. Yu Dai composed himself and looked down at the ground under his feet. It seemed that he had really come to the wrong place. As if he had already decided on something, Yu Dai raised his head. His eyes were clear, and on the stage, the other dancers had already shown a new style. Yu Dai was a little reluctant, but he was also determined. He slowly walked to the front of one of the team leaders and whispered something. When the team leader heard it, he didn't show any surprise or abnormality. It was as if Yu Dai's words were within his expectations. After listening to Yu Dai's words, the team leader nodded slightly and raised his head to look at the competition on the stage again. When Yu Dai raised his hand to salute and prepared to leave, the team leader just waved his hand. Yu Dai left. He was very determined to leave this stage that didn't belong to him. When he left the noisy crowd and walked towards the door, he heard someone calling him from behind. When he turned around, he saw that it was Shen Guanyun. Looking at Shen Guanyun's somewhat lonely expression, Yu Dai smiled. He wasn't alone after all. Just like that, the two contestants from the Lotus Escort Agency left. They waved their hands and didn't take away any of the clouds that had caught their attention. Presumably, for a long time after this, there wouldn't be anyone from the Lotus Escort Agency coming to participate in the martial arts exhibition. Yu Dai and Shen Guanyun didn't talk about the martial arts exhibition along the way. They also didn't have the mood to pay attention to or discuss the other wild card contestant, Zhang Xiaohua. Presumably, in their hearts, even someone of their level couldn't withstand a single blow. In their eyes, Zhang Xiaohua was like a country bumpkin. What could she do? She would probably be shot down from the sky as soon as she went on stage. The two of them only had one thought right now. What was that bastard Yuluan thinking? He actually urged them to participate in some bullshit martial arts exhibition and made them lose face. When they got back, the first person they would deal with would be him. And Yuluan, who was doing his best to flatter Fourth Master Wen, was sneezing incessantly. He was very puzzled as he asked himself, last night at the fragrance house, how could he have behaved himself? After all, the silver that Yu Dai tipped him was spent sparingly. Not to mention that the two extras of the martial arts exhibition had finally realized that they had completed their mission and forfeited. In the square of Kitty Hawk Hall, the other extras didn't have any awareness of being a supporting character. He was very proud of himself as he bragged about his boxing skills to his sister who worshipped him. In fact, if one were to talk about bragging, Zhang Xiaohua was a bit overboard. She didn't talk much, but she couldn't stand Chen Chen's incessant questioning. Zhang Xiaohua's Big Dipper magical fist was different from the current popular boxing skills, but it was also very similar. Chen Chen had also learned many of the moves. She was very curious as to how this somewhat mysterious young man in her heart could change the 108 moves into such a mess and yet still be so harmonious. Unable to withstand the repeated questioning of this curious baby, Zhang Xiaohua really didn't know how she had pieced it together. She could only deal with it tiredly. Therefore, under Chen Chen's deliberate flattery, Zhang Xiaohua's tail was raised a little. Could it be that she was really a legendary genius? Unlike Chen Chen who kept talking, Chang'e next to him was silent. It was not that she didn't like to talk, but Chen Chen dominated Zhang Xiaohua, so Chang'e could only talk to Zhang Xiaohu. Chang'e didn't know much about Zhang Xiaohu, so she didn't know where to start. It was the same for Zhang Xiaohu. He knew nothing about Chang'e and couldn't find a topic to talk about, so there was an awkward silence. Both of them were watching the competition on the ring attentively. After watching for a while, Zhang Xiaohu frowned slightly. He leaned to Chang'e and asked, Junior sister Chang'e, oh, no, Chang'e, can you tell me about the martial arts moves of these two junior brothers on the ring? After all, I just joined the sect and don't know the martial arts of the sect. If I can take this opportunity to learn about the martial arts of our sect, I think it will be beneficial for my future practice. Hearing this, Chang'e smiled slightly. She didn't like this awkward situation. Hearing Zhang Xiaohu's question, she also aroused her desire to be a teacher. She pointed to the contestants on the ring and told Zhang Xiaohu in detail about the moves of each contestant, as well as the advantages and disadvantages of the moves. As a result, Zhang Xiaohu and Zhang Xiaohua enjoyed a memorable perfect afternoon for the first time in history. When the sun was setting in the west, Zhang Xiaohua reluctantly stepped on the ladder again and made a business of trampling on other people's beautiful moves. The result was naturally speechless. The people under the ring were also stupefied as they watched the candles burn out little by little. They had lost interest in watching the competition. What a joke! They had watched 4 such competitions. In the first one, they were still amazed, and in the second one, they could still appreciate it. But they couldn't stand the same few moves again and again. Who would be surprised by it? Even when the two finished competing, the crowd was too lazy to applaud. It wasn't until leader Chang announced that it was a draw that everyone resentfully dispersed. Zhang Xiaohu and the other 3 left fledgling Eagle Hall and walked to the fork in the road. Zhang Xiaohu naturally wanted to invite them to dinner together. In fact, when it came to dinner, it was just going to eat together in the dining hall. There were many disciples in the Misty School, so naturally there were many dining halls. For example, Mingsue Hall and fledgling Eagle Hall all had their own dining halls. As for direct disciples like Zhang Xiaohu, they also had their own dining halls. However, Chang'e didn't give him this opportunity. She only said that it wasn't convenient for them to go to a direct disciples' dining hall. Moreover, he hadn't returned to Mingsue Hall for a day and had to hurry back to see the results of the competition. In short, there were many reasons that rejected Zhang Xiaohu's good intentions. Zhang Xiaohu also didn't force them to stay. Everyone saluted and said goodbye. When Chang'e and Chen Chen were far away, Zhang Xiaohu retracted his gaze. Then he slapped Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder and said with a smile, "Good boy, you actually lied to me yesterday." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He touched the shoulder that Zhang Xiaohu had slapped and pretended to be in pain. He grinned and said, "Second brother, how did I lie to you yesterday?" Zhang Xiaohu laughed and said, "You obviously didn't lose a single match yesterday. Why did you tell me that you lost? I comforted you for a long time yesterday and didn't dare to mention the competition. If I had known that you were so strong that you could draw 3 matches in a row in front of our Misty School's disciples, I would have made a big fuss yesterday." Zhang Xiaohua also said with a smile, "I didn't say that I lost. I just said that I didn't win. But that doesn't mean that I lost. A draw doesn't mean that I didn't win, right?" Zhang Xiaohu was stunned and said in his heart, "That's right. A draw doesn't mean that you didn't win. However, the difference between a draw and a loss is too big." Then, Zhang Xiaohua said, "Moreover, I didn't win. This is a fact. It's not too late for you to be happy when I win tomorrow." Zhang Xiaohu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He wanted to say to him, "Forget it. You've only practiced martial arts for a few days. How can you compare with them?" But he didn't want to dispel his enthusiasm, so he had to say, "Well, let's see how good you are tomorrow. Don't draw again." Zhang Xiaohua patted his chest and said, "Second brother, let's see what I can do tomorrow." How could Zhang Xiaohu believe that? It would be strange if there was a second word in addition to the first word tomorrow. After a while, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly said, "Second brother, tomorrow is the last day of the martial arts exhibition. I guess we'll have to go back to the Huanxi Villa tomorrow night. It's still early today. I want to see Captain He and the others. They must be almost done today. What do you think?" Zhang Xiaohu thought about it. Since Chang'e and the others had a lot of time to spend in the Kitty Eagle Hall today, He Tianshu and the others should also be done with the competition. So he nodded and walked in the direction of the pharmacy with Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohu naturally didn't know where the pharmacy was, but there was a path right under his nose. After asking around, he found the pharmacy. The location of the pharmacy was very strange. It was actually in the innermost part of the Misty Mountain Villa. It was a long journey from the Kitty Eagle Hall to the pharmacy. Along the way, he encountered many excited disciples. After all, it was a grand event that happened once a year. Many people had gained something. Moreover, many of the squares were dismantled. Presumably, they needed to be cleaned up after the competition. Lanterns and torches were lit in every small courtyard and square. It must be another noisy and orderly night. After walking for a long time according to other people's directions, there were fewer people. Then they came to a row of big blue walls. There was also a vermilion door that was wide open. There were several huge lanterns hanging in front of the door, shining on the golden words on the door, Pharmacy. Unlike the Kitty Eagle Hall, there were guards at the door of the pharmacy. The disciples who came in and out of the door had to verify their waist tags. It was still early in the night, and there were many disciples coming in and out. Looking at their habitual expressions, it must be a routine. Zhang Xiaohu brought Zhang Xiaohua to the door. When the guard saw that Zhang Xiaohu looked unfamiliar, he unconsciously became vigilant and went forward to stop them. Zhang Xiaohu did not find it strange and obediently showed his waist tag. Zhang Xiaohua did not have a waist tag and only handed over her martial arts exhibition number. The guard carefully looked at Zhang Xiaohu's waist tag and asked a few detailed questions before returning it. However, after looking at Zhang Xiaohua's number, he shook his head and said, "This little brother, the martial arts exhibition number only shows that you can participate in the competition. It does not show your identity. Do you have a waist tag?" Zhang Xiaohua had an idea and patted her head. Didn't she still have the waist tag of Huanxi Mountain Villa? Since the last time she returned to the villa, Qiu Tong gave her a waist tag and said that in the future, she did not need to take the waist tag from the guard to go out of the Huanxi Mountain Villa. She had long forgotten about it. She had also heard from He Tianshu that she could enter the Misty Mountain Villa with the waist tag of Huanxi Mountain Villa. How could she forget? So she quickly found the waist tag of Huanxi Mountain Villa and handed it over. The guard took it and carefully looked at it. He smiled and said, "Little brother, you are here to participate in the martial arts exhibition at Huanxi Mountain Villa, right?" Zhang Xiaohua quickly nodded and said yes. But the guard still looked regretful and said, "This waist tag of Huanxi Mountain Villa naturally allows you to enter our Misty School. Unfortunately, the pharmacy hall is an important place in the school. Other than the pharmacy hall's disciples and core disciples, others are not allowed to casually enter. Although little brother's waist tag can prove your identity, you can't enter." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she became anxious and said, "Is the pharmacy hall very important? I just want to see Captain He Tianshu, that's all." The guard still looked helpless and said, "It's not that I don't want to help you. Little brother, we do have this rule. Unless you have a special permission tag issued by our pharmacy hall's elders or above, otherwise, even if He Tianshu comes to pick you up in person, it won't work." Zhang Xiaohua was depressed. She just came to see He Tianshu, Nie Xiao'er, and the others. Why was it so troublesome? Forget it, she'd better go back to her second brother. Please collect it, thank you. Chapter 176. Zhang Xiaohu saw that Zhang Xiaohua was unhappy, so he said to the guard, "Then can I go in?" The guard said, "Of course you can." Zhang Xiaohu said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, wait here for a while. I'll go in and find Captain He." Zhang Xiaohua said, "Forget it, second brother. If you don't let me in, then I won't. Anyway, the martial arts competition will end tomorrow. When I return to the Huanxi Mountain Villa, I'll still be able to see him. I just want to take a look at the pharmacy today. Since you don't let me in, then I'll go back." Zhang Xiaohu knew that his younger brother wanted to go in, and his eyes were full of disappointment. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua was still a teenager. There was nothing interesting about the pharmacy. He came all the way here, but he was rejected at the door. His curiosity grew stronger. Whether he went in or not wasn't a problem. However, Zhang Xiaohu didn't want to disappoint his younger brother. After all, he was also a disciple of the Misty School. In his own territory, he wanted Zhang Xiaohua to have her wish fulfilled. He smiled and patted Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder, saying, "I'll go in and find Captain He. You wait by the door for a moment." Zhang Xiaohua opened her mouth, wanting to stop her second brother. However, Zhang Xiaohu didn't say anything. He turned around and asked the guard where he Tianshu lived. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua could only scratch her head and obediently stand to the side. The guard gave a simple description of the general location. Zhang Xiaohu turned around and nodded at Zhang Xiaohua before entering the door. Zhang Xiaohu went in for a long time, but didn't come out. Zhang Xiaohua was a little bored and wandered around the entrance of the pharmacy. At this time, the sky was already dark. There were even fewer people going in and out of the pharmacy. As Zhang Xiaohua was walking, she happened to see a middle-aged man coming back from afar. He was walking towards the entrance of the pharmacy. With the light from afar, Zhang Xiaohua found that person familiar. However, she couldn't remember who he was. She didn't care. She only knew a few people in the Misty School. Perhaps she was mistaken. That person also noticed Zhang Xiaohua. Think about it, in front of the empty door, there was only a teenager strolling around. It was impossible not to notice him. The person just glanced at him at first and didn't care. He continued to walk forward. However, after a few steps, he seemed to think of something. He stared at Zhang Xiaohua for a while and frowned slightly. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua didn't notice this. She had already turned around and strolled in another direction. That person was slightly annoyed when he saw that Zhang Xiaohua didn't come forward to greet him. When he walked to the entrance, he pulled a long face and scolded the guard, "How do you do things? How can you let an outsider stroll around the door?" An outsider? The guard was a little surprised. He quickly looked out and saw a lonely figure strolling outside. The guard smiled apologetically and said, "Deacon Chang, that teenager isn't a disciple of our Misty School, but he's not an outsider either. He's from the Huanxi Manor. He's not an outsider." It would have been fine if he did not hear those words. However, upon hearing those words, that attendant Chang grew even more furious. He loudly berated, "What? Who told you that the people from the Huanxi Manor aren't outsiders? Don't tell me that the people from the Huanxi Manor are disciples of the Misty School." The guard was very surprised. He didn't know if there was anything wrong with what he said. He had received instructions that the Huanxi Manor's token could allow him to enter the Misty Manor, but not the pharmacy. Besides, what's wrong with that teenager strolling in front of your pharmacy? Don't tell me he's trying to rape you. Even if he's trying to rape you, he hasn't done it yet. What right do you have to drive him away? However, the guard still said cautiously, "Deacon Chang, this one doesn't care if the people from the Huanxi Manor are from the Misty School. This one's duty is to guard this door. Any outsider who doesn't meet the rules can't be allowed to enter. As for whether there are people strolling around or fighting outside the door, it has nothing to do with this one." At this time, Zhang Xiaohua also strolled to the door again. Seeing the middle-aged man arguing with the guard, she was very curious and came over. Deacon Chang was annoyed that he had been rebuffed. He raised his voice and said, "What? How dare you talk to me like that? You. The guard was also angry. He took a step closer and said, "What about me? Deacon Chang." Hearing the words, Deacon Chang, Zhang Xiaohua's mind lit up. She immediately remembered. Wasn't this middle-aged man one of the people who came to the Huanxi Manor to inspect the medicine fields last year? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel happy. She walked forward with a smile on her face and saluted, "Marshal Uncle Chang, how are you? Do you still remember me?" Deacon Chang had nowhere to vent his anger. Although the guard was only a gatekeeper, he wasn't under the management of the pharmacy. Even if his position was higher than his, he didn't have the authority to give orders. Now that he was humiliated by the guard, he could only swallow his anger. This Zhang Xiaohua just happened to come over and hit the muzzle. Deacon Chang fiercely glared at Zhang Xiaohua. He spat out a mouthful of thick phlegm and said, "Who is your martial uncle? Why don't you take a good look in the mirror? Do you have the qualifications to be my nephew? Why didn't you stay in the Huanxi Manor to look after the fields? Why did you come to our misty school? Don't you know if this is the place you should come? After saying that, he flicked his sleeves and turned to go in. Seeing this, the guard shouted, "Deacon Chang, how can you be so unethical? Didn't sect leader O always advocate the slogan of cleanliness and hygiene? How can you spit everywhere? Be careful or I'll punish you." Deacon Chang, who had walked far away, paused for a moment. He didn't stop and walked straight away. In front of the gate, only Zhang Xiaohua was left standing there alone. Tears were rolling in her eyes and almost flowed down. She really didn't know how she had offended this so-called martial uncle. She had only seen him once in the Huanxi Manor. This was only the second time. She just came to greet him. How could he treat her like this? Could it be that this was the legendary hot face stuck to a cold butt? Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's appearance, the guard didn't know how to comfort her. Today, Deacon Chang was also strange. He wasn't like this on a normal day. Why did he dislike this young man so much? However, the dispute between her and Deacon Chang today was also caused by this young man. Indeed, there were secrets that she didn't know. Putting aside the fact that Zhang Xiaohua was bullied for the time being, when Zhang Xiaohu walked through the gate of the pharmacy hall, the gate of the pharmacy hall wasn't like the Young Eagle Hall. After entering, there was a large square. Instead, there was a screen wall with a large number of flowers, birds, insects, and fish carved on it. After turning around the screen wall, there was also a large area. There were many ancient trees that couldn't be hugged by one person. In the dark night, the wind blew and the leaves rustled. The gap between the ancient trees was very wide and there was a flat road to pass through. Zhang Xiaohu walked inside according to the guard's instructions. After walking for a while, it was even quieter inside. In the dark night, he could vaguely see the shadow of the mountain peak. Zhang Xiaohu suddenly understood. No wonder he had walked so far. The pharmacy hall was actually on the mountain peak behind the manor. At this time, someone happened to come over in front. Zhang Xiaohu confirmed He Tianshu's position again. When the person heard that he was looking for He Tianshu, he smiled and said, "It's not appropriate to look for him in his room at this time. He passed the competition today and is in the training room." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he quickly inquired about the location of the training room. The person thought for a while and said, "The training room is still some distance from here. Our pharmacy hall is built on the mountain. The path is not easy to find. I'll take you there." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he thanked him again and again. Sure enough, the training room was not close to this place. There were many twists and turns, and he had walked quite a distance. Moreover, the key point was that the pharmacy built on the mountain was not flat. If Zhang Xiaohu had walked on his own, it would have been really difficult to find it. Along the way, the two people chatted casually. Zhang Xiaohu couldn't help but ask curiously, "It's already so late. Why is He Tianshu still in the training room?" The person smiled and said, "It's all because of the martial arts competition. This He Tianshu hasn't advanced for several years, and he didn't mix well in the pharmacy hall. That was why he was sent to Huanxi Manor to look after the medicinal field. Who knows where he learned the ethereal steps. This time, he actually passed 2 stages in a row. In the morning, he actually beat Chang Biao down from the arena. Chang Biao entered the Misty School with He Tianshu. The two of them have always been competing openly and secretly. He Tianshu has never gained the upper hand. Chang Biao is already a deacon, but He Tianshu is only a captain. As a matter of fact, He Tianshu won the competition today. Many dissatisfied senior and junior brothers dragged him to the training room, wanting to have a good spar with him. Ethereal steps. Zhang Xiaohu's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that the extremely useful movement technique that Zhang Xiaohua used during the day was the ethereal steps? It must be so. His younger brother was with He Tianshu all day. He Tianshu probably imparted it to him. Sure enough, when they arrived at the training room, the usually quiet training room was still bustling with people. He Tianshu's somewhat arrogant and hearty laughter could be heard from inside. It seemed that this guy had won a lot of people today. The two of them entered and saw many people standing in the open space of the training room. There were two people in the field, and the winner had already been decided. One was He Tianshu, and the other was a slightly younger man. That man was climbing up from the ground and scolded with a smile, "Old He, I told you to be a little merciful. Why did you still kick me down?" He Tianshu smiled and said, "Forget it. Didn't I just learn it? I can't control my body. Besides, you usually throw me to the ground many times. Today, I'm just taking a little revenge." That person clicked his tongue and praised, "This ethereal steps is indeed miraculous. Previously, you weren't my match, but now, I'm not your match." A scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at with new eyes. It's exactly to describe you. He Tianshu cupped his hands and said, "It's just so. I'm still a beginner. I'm far from being a direct disciple." Just as they were talking, they saw Zhang Xiaohu follow that person in. He Tianshu couldn't help but be stunned. He hurriedly walked out of the field and asked in surprise, "Zhang Xiaohu, are you here to look for me?" Zhang Xiaohu bowed and said, "Yes, Captain He. I brought Xiaohua to see you." "Zhang Xiaohua? Where is he?" He Tianshu looked behind him. Zhang Xiaohu said, "There's no need to look. He can't come in. He's still waiting for you at the entrance." Only then did He Tianshu come to a realization. He patted his forehead and turned back and said, "Brothers, I have a friend here. Let's end it here for today. Let's spar again in the future." When everyone heard this, they dispersed in an uproar. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said to He Tianshu, "Captain He, you're feeling proud." He Tianshu said embarrassedly, "It's nothing. It's just that they saw me win against Senior Chang in the morning and found it strange. That's why they insisted on sparring with me. I had no choice." Zhang Xiaohu said, "Let's go out quickly. I'm sure Xiaohua is waiting anxiously at the entrance." When He Tianshu heard this, he hurriedly followed him out. When they reached the corner, he suddenly stopped and said, "If I go over like this, I'll only see Zhang Xiaohua once. He can't come in. Come on, you might as well come with me to the hall master and ask for a waste token so that Zhang Xiaohua can come in and see our pharmacy hall." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he hesitated and said, "Won't it take too long? Xiaohua has been waiting outside for a long time." He Tianshu tugged on his sleeve and said, "Let's go. I know this little brother of yours well. He just wanted to take a look at the pharmacy hall and see how we grow herbs. Otherwise, why would he think of coming to see me? Moreover, the martial arts exhibition is only a few days away. Won't he still be able to see me when he returns to Huanxi Manor?" Zhang Xiaohu chuckled and didn't answer. He followed He Tianshu in another direction. After walking for a while, they came to a rather large courtyard. There were also disciples guarding the door. He Tianshu went forward and asked in a low voice, "Is the hall master inside?" The disciple hurriedly saluted and said, "Martial Uncle He, the hall master is inside. There are also elders." "That's right, Martial Uncle Chang also just went in." As he said this, the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. He Tianshu slapped him on the head and said, "You little brat, what's so funny? Don't talk about flowers behind us." The disciple touched his head and said, "Martial Uncle He, I didn't say anything. Anyway, you had a great time winning this morning. We were all happy for you." He Tianshu said, "You bunch of brats who only want to see the world in chaos." Although his tone was a little angry, there was some happiness on his face. After saying this, he led Zhang Xiaohu into the courtyard. Before He Tianshu and Zhang Xiaohu could enter the hall, they heard Deacon Chang's voice from the hall, "Hall master, am I right?" Who is that Zhang Xiaohua? He's just a servant from the Huanxi Manor. How can he sneak into our misty school with the Huanxi Manor's token? He's even strolling around the entrance of our pharmacy hall. What is he doing? Why does he have to come to our pharmacy hall of all places? Does he have any ulterior motives? Our pharmacy hall is an important place in the sect. If he steals something out, we won't be able to explain it to the higher-ups. I saw him sneaking around the entrance and wanted the guards to drive him away, but the guards actually spoke up for him. Don't you think this is a classic example of collusion? Hall Master, you have to be careful. Quickly replace that guard. When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, anger rose from his heart. Who is this Chang in the hall? How dare he talk about my brother like this? He couldn't help but quicken his pace. Seeing this, He Tianshu quickly pulled his sleeve and whispered, "Don't worry, listen to me." Zhang Xiaohu looked at He Tianshu, who was also angry, and could only nod his head. He Tianshu led Zhang Xiaohu to the entrance of the hall. He didn't break in, but stood there quietly. Hall Master Bai of the pharmacy hall was sitting on a chair in the hall, slowly sipping tea. Beside him was Elder He, whose hair and beard were all white. Deacon Chang was standing in the middle of the hall, gesticulating as he spoke. Deacon Chang said again, "This Zhang Xiaohua has been with He Tianshu in Huanxi Mountain Villa. I don't know what they are doing, but even the seeds of the herbs won't germinate. He Tianshu seems to be very protective of this manservant. He even wants to let him read the books in the pharmacy hall. Why doesn't he think that a manservant actually wants to enter the pharmacy hall through a side door? Why doesn't he look at his own virtue?" Hall Master Bai looked up and saw He Tianshu. He put down his teacup and said with a smile, "He Tianshu, why are you free to come here? Weren't you surrounded by that group of boys to compare notes?" Deacon Chang heard this and quickly stopped talking. When he looked back, he saw He Tianshu and Zhang Xiaohu staring at him fiercely. He couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable and murmured, "He Tianshu, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the manservant in Huanxi Mountain Villa." He Tianshu ignored him and went forward to greet Hall Master Bai and Elder He. Zhang Xiaohu behind him also hurried forward and said, "Junior Zhang Xiaohu greets Hall Master Bai and Elder He." In fact, Zhang Xiaohu didn't know how to address the two people in the hall, so he could only call them juniors. Hall Master Bai had seen Zhang Xiaohu in the hall when he entered the Misty School and knew that he was Wen Wenhai's disciple. Elder He also saw Zhang Xiaohu at the apprenticeship ceremony later and knew of his identity. Therefore, he didn't dare to slight him. He bowed slightly and let Zhang Xiaohu sit on the chair below. Hearing Zhang Xiaohu's name, Deacon Chang's heart thumped. He thought to himself, does this Zhang Xiaohu have something to do with Zhang Xiaohua? However, he immediately thought, the pharmacy hall can't be entered by non-pharmacy disciples and core disciples. This person isn't from the pharmacy hall, so he's naturally a core disciple. Since he's a core disciple, he won't have anything to do with a manservant in Huanxi Mountain Villa. He immediately relaxed. He Tianshu stood next to Chang Biao and ignored him. He only said to Hall Master Bai, "Hall Master, a friend of mine wants to visit the pharmacy hall. You've seen this person before. It's Zhang Xiaohua from Huanxi Mountain Villa. Can you give him a waist token and let him in?" Chang Biao heard this and immediately objected, "Junior brother He, this Zhang Xiaohua is just a manservant in Huanxi Mountain Villa. Although he's very close to you in the villa, our pharmacy hall is an important place in the sect. How can we just let him in? If something happens, can you bear the responsibility?" He Tianshu looked at him with a smile and said, "Senior brother Chang, let's not talk about Zhang Xiaohua's identity first. Regardless of whether he's a manservant in Huanxi Mountain Villa or not, I just want to ask, on what basis do you think he has ulterior motives and wants to come to the pharmacy hall to steal chickens and dogs for a living?" Chapter 177. Zhang Xiaohu also narrowed his eyes and stared at him coldly. Chang Biao looked a little embarrassed and said, "Since junior brother He heard it, I don't want to hide it anymore. When I came back, I saw Zhang Xiaohua loitering outside the door. Who knew that he was looking for you? Moreover, this is the time of the martial arts exhibition. There are people coming and going. It's inevitable that some rascals will sneak in. Our pharmacy is an important place in the sect. Of course, I have to be careful. I told the guard to be careful, but he said that I was meddling. How can I not be angry? I came back to remind you for the sake of our pharmacy. If anything happens, it's hard to say in front of the grand gang leader. He Tianshu was so angry that he laughed and said, don't you know Zhang Xiaohua? If he's lacking in morals, how can the Huanqi manor keep him? Moreover, he's always with me. Anyone who has a brain and isn't a mess should know that he's looking for me when they see him at the entrance of the pharmacy. Chang Biao sneered and said, Junior brother you're bringing trouble to yourself. Who can say that someone you know at the entrance is looking for you? So, you should be held responsible for what anyone you know does in the pharmacy. He Tianshu was about to refute when Hall Master Bai said, you two don't have to quarrel. Tianshu, take this token and bring Zhang Xiaohua in. Except for the forbidden area in the pharmacy, he can visit the other places. After that, Hall Master Bai took out a token and was about to hand it to He Tianshu. Chang Biao heard this and immediately became anxious. Nonsense, he had complained for a long time. If the token was given, he would have wasted his efforts. Chang Biao said, Hall Master, please don't do this. Our pharmacy is the most important. How can we let an irrelevant person visit? If anything happens, we can't take responsibility. Hall Master Bai was furious. He thought to himself, you lost to He Tianshu in the morning, so you're angry and came to me to complain. I'll just treat it as a psychological adjustment and give you a free consultation. I'll accept it. But you can't stop me from making a decision. Moreover, he couldn't directly tell Chang Biao about Boss O's impression of Zhang Xiaohua. Hall Chief Bai had clearly seen Boss O's attitude towards Zhang Xiaohua in the meeting hall. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Zhang Xiaohua was O Yan's savior. O Yan's position in O Peng's heart was well known by the entire Misty School. O Peng only had one younger sister, and he was afraid that she would fall and melt in his mouth. Although O Peng had already stated in the meeting hall that he had repaid Zhang Xiaohua for saving his life, after all, Zhang Xiaohua had saved his life. This matter had already happened and would never be erased. Zhang Xiaohua's position had already been set. It was impossible to change it. If Zhang Xiaohua had any evil intentions towards the pharmacy, he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. Just as Hall Master Bai was about to reprimand Chang Biao, Zhang Xiaohu next to him stood up and said, I'm here to vouch for Zhang Xiaohua. I'll take full responsibility for his actions in the pharmacy. Chang Biao's heart skipped a beat. This person was really related to Zhang Xiaohua. After Zhang Xiaohu finished speaking, he cupped his hands towards Chang Biao and said, I'm Zhang Xiaohu. I'm a disciple of Master O's disciple, Wen Hai. This Zhang Xiaohua is my younger brother. When Chang Biao heard this, it was as if he was struck by lightning. His face turned pale and he secretly complained, how did this Zhang Xiaohua suddenly turn over a new leaf? An ugly chicken leaped onto a branch. He actually has the older brother of a master's direct disciple. What should I do? How did I offend a direct disciple for no reason? Sigh, Chang Biao's thoughts turned and he immediately put on a smiling face and said, Io, martial nephew Zhang, this is the first time we've met. Nice to meet you. I really didn't know that Zhang Xiaohua was your younger brother. It's a misunderstanding. Just now I was a bit presumptuous. If I knew earlier that Zhang Xiaohua had this kind of relationship with our Misty School, I would have personally come to ask Hall Master for this token. Hee. This guy's face changed really quickly. Everyone in the hall had the same thought at this time. Since Chang Biao didn't stop him, He Tianshu took the token and quickly went to pick up Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohu had been looking for him for quite some time, and he wasted a lot of time at Hall Master Bai's place. Presumably, Zhang Xiaohua was already annoyed waiting outside. When He Tianshu and Zhang Xiaohu took the token and rushed out, Chang Biao finally calmed down. He opened his mouth to say something, but he couldn't say anything. He could only cup his hands towards Hall Master Bai and Elder He and leave alone. After Chang Biao left, Elder He, who hadn't said anything all this time, asked in confusion, "Old Bai, this Chang Biao has been narrow-minded for a long time. His martial arts have always been superior to He Tianshu's. This time, he was suddenly defeated, so he must be feeling terrible." Hall Master Bai frowned and said, "I know. That's why I didn't interrupt him even after he talked for so long. I wanted him to say it to his heart's content." Elder He continued, "He Tianshu's popularity in our pharmacy hall isn't that good, so Chang Biao wouldn't have come to cause trouble. Chang Biao was caught bad-mouthing He Tianshu's friend, so this is Chang Biao's fault. In order to comfort He Tianshu, I can understand why you gave that Zhang Xiaohua a token. However, although that Zhang Xiaohu is the direct disciple of the Grand Faction Master, he has just entered the sect. You don't have to give his disciple so much face. Other than a few forbidden areas, you can visit all the pharmacy hall's territories as you wish." Hall Master Bai smiled bitterly. This elder He wasn't an outsider. He had built this pharmacy hall together with him for many years. He was truly trustworthy, but there were many things inside that a person like him shouldn't know. Thus, Hall Master Bai lowered his voice and said, "Do you know why He Tianshu was able to defeat Chang Biao?" Elder He frowned and said, "Isn't it just learning the ethereal steps? It's not like I don't recognize it." Hall Master Bai continued to ask, "Then do you know why he was able to learn the ethereal steps?" Elder He said, "Isn't it because of the reward for He Tianshu's trip to the south?" Hall Master Bai smiled mysteriously and asked again, "Then shouldn't that stone cow, Aunt Qin, and that Lan Dong be rewarded? Why didn't they learn the ethereal steps?" Elder He was stunned and said, "This. When you put it that way, it's true." Hall Master Bai smiled and said even more carefully, "It's because of that Zhang Xiaohua that He Tianshu was so lucky to learn our sex ethereal steps." Elder He was even more astonished and asked, "Did He Tianshu tell you this?" Hall Master Bai drank a mouthful of tea and said leisurely, "I saw him execute it earlier and interrogated him in detail. He stammered and refused to speak the truth. He only said that it was Grand Gang Leader O's grace. His words vaguely pointed out that it was related to Zhang Xiaohua." Oh, only then did Elder He understand. Then, Hall Master Bai said another sentence which was like a 1,000-pound stone thrown into Elder He's heart lake. Furthermore, Zhang Xiaohu was able to enter Wen Wenhai's tutelage because of Zhang Xiaohua. When Elder He heard that, he couldn't help but be shocked and said, "This. How is this possible?" Hall Master Bai waved his hand and looked as though he knew what was going on and wasn't alarmed at all. Elder He was convinced. As expected of a hall master, he was really strong. He Tianshu led Zhang Xiaohu all the way to the entrance of the medicine hall and saw a small figure sitting obediently on the steps in front of the door. She didn't move at all and no one knew what she was thinking about. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's back, Zhang Xiaohu shouted in a low voice, "Xiaohua." When Zhang Xiaohua heard her second brother's shout, she immediately jumped up from the steps. Her originally gloomy face instantly revealed a smile and she shouted cheerfully, "Second brother, you're finally back." Then, she also saw He Tianshu and shouted, "Captain He, you're finally out. Your medicine hall is really hard to enter." He Tianshu smiled and said, "It's your fault for not coming earlier. Moreover, I didn't know you would come. You fought in the arena for an entire day. Aren't you tired? Why didn't you go to your second brother's place to rest and prepare for tomorrow's competition? Why did you come here?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "I haven't seen Captain He for a few days. I missed you, so I came to take a look." He Tianshu patted her little head and said, "You have a sweet mouth. Let's go in and take a look. This is the place where I grew up." Zhang Xiaohua looked at the guard at the door and said, "Forget it. It's too difficult to enter your medicine hall. Just now, someone wanted to drive me away. Drive you away? He Tianshu was stunned and then asked, is it the one surnamed Chang you met in Huanxi Mountain Villa? Tell me about him. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and told him what had happened just now. He Tianshu was angry. He had heard Chang Biao's words from Hall Master by just now. He thought that Chang Biao was just making things up in front of Hall Master Bai. He didn't expect that Chang Biao would really scold Zhang Xiaohua in front of him. At this time, He Tianshu's chest was about to explode. You're an adult. Even if you're angry, you can't treat a child like this. Zhang Xiaohua saw that He Tianshu was unhappy and quickly said, Captain He, it's okay. This martial Uncle Chang hasn't seen me for a long time and probably forgot about me. He Tianshu gritted his teeth and said, don't call him martial uncle. You're not a disciple of the Misty School. If you're happy, just call him Chang Biao. If you're unhappy, just ignore him. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and looked at her second brother. Zhang Xiaohu also looked unhappy and didn't say anything. He Tianshu pulled her hand and said, let's go. Since he won't let you in, we'll go in. Zhang Xiaohua quickly pulled her hand back and said, don't, Captain He. The guards said that no one is allowed to enter without the hall master's token. Let's not cause trouble. He Tianshu took out the token from his chest and said with a smile, let's go, Zhang Xiaohua. I've already brought this token for you. Today, you can openly enter this door and look around the medicine hall. Look around? Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and said, it's already so late and I still have to look around. Ah! Hearing this, He Tianshu and Zhang Xiaohu were both stunned. They looked at each other and laughed out loud. That's right, the sky was almost completely dark. Even if there were lanterns and torches in the medicine hall, how could they see clearly? The two of them were angry with Chang Biao and forgot about this. He Tianshu held the token and thought for a moment before saying, how about this, Zhang Xiaohua? Since we've already brought this token, you can go in and take a look. Also, our medicine hall is quite far from where your second brother lives. It's already late, so why don't you go in and take a look? You can stay in the medicine hall tonight. Zhang Xiaohua didn't care. Didn't it matter where she stayed? He glanced at Zhang Xiaohu. Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and said, that's fine too. Xiaohua, since we're here, let's go in and take a look. We can't let people say that we can't enter the medicine hall, right? We'll stay here tonight and let people know that not only did we enter the medicine hall, but we'll also stay for the night. Let's see if anything happens to the medicine hall. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was very happy and said loudly, let's go, let's go. After saying that, He Tianshu took the token and handed it to the guard to check. Then, he led the two of them into the medicine hall with their heads held high. The layout of the medicine hall was actually similar to that of Huanxi Mountain Villa. There were different small courtyards. However, there were many disciples in the medicine hall. The different courtyards were many times bigger than that of Huanxi Mountain Villa. Zhang Xiaohua listened to He Tianshu's introduction of the library, medicine hall, medicine refining room, practice room, and other places. Then, she looked at the splendid courtyard walls and the brightly lit buildings. Countless little stars twinkled in Zhang Xiaohua's eyes. It was really very imposing. She really wanted to read books and practice martial arts inside. Zhang Xiaohua had been to the Misty Mountain Villa twice. Once, she went directly to the conference hall and the library. The other time, she went to Zhang Xiaohu's residence, the real place where the disciples of the Misty School lived. Today was the first time she came here. Naturally, she was very curious and envious. She kept saying in her heart that this trip was not in vain. In addition to the tall buildings used by the disciples, the medicine hall also had many fields planted with medicinal herbs. However, there were not many fields planted with medicinal herbs. It was hard to see clearly in the dark. Zhang Xiaohua felt a little strange and asked, Captain He, are there only so many medicinal herbs in the medicine hall? Although I can't see clearly, why do I feel that it is not much more than that of Huanxi Mountain Villa? He Tianshu listened and said with a smile, the medicinal fields we are looking at now are only used by the disciples of the medicine hall for experiments. The real medicinal fields are not here. Then where is it? Zhang Xiaohua felt a little strange. He Tianshu did not answer, but asked, guess? Zhang Xiaohua tilted her head and thought for a moment. Then, she pointed to the dark mountain next to them and asked tentatively, is it on the mountain next to us? He Tianshu clapped and praised, yes, Zhang Xiaohua, you are really smart. Zhang Xiaohua was embarrassed and said, it's nothing. When I was at the Guizhuang house, I farmed on the hillside. Naturally, I know a little. He Tianshu suddenly said, there is such a thing. No wonder you know. Zhang Xiaohua said regretfully, alas, it is a pity that it is at night. Otherwise, I really want to see that vast medicinal field. He Tianshu said mysteriously, if it is not at night, can you see it during the day? During the day. Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu were a little puzzled. He Tianshu whispered, I don't have any competition tomorrow. If I have time, I will go and watch your competition. When you are done, you can come and watch. Zhang Xiaohua said, don't you need to return that token tomorrow? Besides, it'll be dark by the time I'm done with the competition. He Tianshu said, it is fine. If it is not tomorrow, there is still the day after. In any case, this token will not be returned to the hall master. Zhang Xiaohua almost jumped up and said, really? Then let me use it in the future. Don't return it. He Tianshu said, forget it. It is fine if you use it for a few days, but it is not suitable for a long time. Zhang Xiaohu chuckled and said, Xiaohua is probably just joking. Why does he come to the pharmacy every day? Zhang Xiaohua chuckled and did not answer. Thus, the three of them chatted and laughed as they walked along the small path. When they reached a fork in the road, Zhang Xiaohua walked along the path that went up the mountain and went inside. When He Tianshu saw this, he hurriedly pulled him and said, you can't go down this path. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He looked into the darkness and asked, why? Because along the way, Zhang Xiaohua had been walking blindly in front. He Tianshu did not stop him. After all, he had grown up here. It did not matter where he went. He could always come back in the end. He Tianshu also looked at the dark end of the small path and said, that path goes up the mountain. We can't see anything at night. Why go there? Zhang Xiaohua heard the difference and said softly, Captain He, wasn't there a path up the mountain just now? Didn't you not stop me? Why did you stop me on this path? What is the difference between this mountain path and that one? He Tianshu coughed twice and said, well, there is indeed a difference. But He Tianshu looked like he was in a difficult position. Although Zhang Xiaohu could not see He Tianshu's face clearly, he heard his tone and hurriedly said, Captain He, it's okay. If there is a problem, we won't go over. Anyway, it's already dark. Let's quickly find a place to stay. He Tianshu thought for a moment and explained, it's like this. This small path leads to a forbidden area in the mountains behind our misty school. Not only can the two of you not go near it, but even I have never been there before. Forbidden area. Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu could not help but cry out, what is a forbidden area? He Tianshu hurriedly stopped them and said, can the two of you be quieter? I can't stand being scared. If Hall Master Bai finds out that I brought the two of you to a forbidden area, he will definitely scold me. Zhang Xiaohua and He Tianshu hurriedly said softly, we understand. Be quiet. He Tianshu also said softly, this forbidden area is a place where no one is allowed to go near. In other words, the disciples of our misty school are forbidden to go to this place. Whoever goes there will be violating the rules and will be punished by the rules. Zhang Xiaohua's curiosity was piqued and she asked softly, then do you know what is in this forbidden area? He Tianshu glared at him and said, since people are forbidden to go in, naturally they don't want people to know what is inside. How would I know? Zhang Xiaohua's gossipy nature was suddenly awakened and she asked, then, there must be some gossip about this forbidden area. Chapter 178. He Tianshu was surprised and asked, how do you know that there are rumors in this forbidden area? Zhang Xiaohua said mysteriously, it's all written in the book. Anything that prevents people from exploring will always arouse people's curiosity. The more you obstruct and cover it up, the more information there will be about it. He Tianshu smiled and said, the book is really vivid. However, it seems that no one dares to explore this forbidden area. Of course, there are indeed a lot of rumors. Zhang Xiaohua quickly pricked up her ears, wanting to satisfy her curiosity. Unfortunately, He Tianshu sighed and said, but you're not a disciple of the Misty School. I can't tell you these things. Just give up on this idea. Zhang Xiaohua complained, Captain He, if you don't want to say it, just say that there isn't. Now that you mention it, I'm always thinking about it. Can I still sleep at night? He Tianshu shook his head and said, no matter if there is or not, I can't tell you. Besides, if you can't sleep, even ghosts won't believe it. Zhang Xiaohua saw that He Tianshu refused to say anything. Naturally, she knew the severity of the matter. She scolded Zhang Xiaohua, Xiaohua, don't be naughty. Since Captain He said so, there must be some difficulties. Why do you have to make it difficult for him? Zhang Xiaohua said resentfully, I was just joking. I wanted to test Captain He's principles and see if he can withstand the test. He's a disciple that Boss O can trust. Thus, the three of them left the fork in the road while talking. Zhang Xiaohua still didn't give up and looked back at the end of the mysterious path in the distance. The three of them walked along the path and casually looked around for a while before He Tianshu led them to an exquisite small courtyard. He said, this is the guest room of the pharmacy hall. Let me take you in. There seems to be no one in the courtyard right now. Just find a place to stay. I might as well stay here and accompany you. Zhang Xiaohu felt bad and said, Captain He, you should go back to your place. We can take care of ourselves. He Tianshu shook his head and said, it's better if I don't go back. Didn't you see it just now? When these people saw that I won today, they were all unconvinced and wanted to challenge me. I defeated a bunch of them in the training room, so I'm sure there are many people waiting for me there. I can't afford to offend them, but can't I just hide? I'm definitely staying here tonight. Zhang Xiaohu had seen the scene in the training room and knew that what He Tianshu said was true. He smiled and nodded. Zhang Xiaohua was naturally happy as well. There were many rooms in the small courtyard. He Tianshu asked, do you two brothers live together or separately? Zhang Xiaohua said first, of course we live together. I haven't lived with my second brother for a long time. I slept very soundly last night. Zhang Xiaohu thought of Zhang Xiaohua's question this morning. He was really afraid that he would say something in his sleep again, so he said, forget it, Xiaohua. You've grown up now. You can live by yourself in the future. Don't you live alone in Huanqi Villa? Zhang Xiaohua was not willing to do that. She just said no, and Zhang Xiaohu insisted. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to think of something and said quickly, second brother, I lied to you this morning when I said that you called Chang'e. You didn't say anything at all. Besides, I slept so soundly at night. How could I hear you? But how could Zhang Xiaohu believe her words now? He Tianshu also felt strange when he heard them mention Chang'e. So, at Zhang Xiaohu's insistence, the three of them each found a guest room and rested. It was getting late. Outside the small courtyard, the sound of insects kept rising and falling. In the empty guest room in the small courtyard, only the three of them were doing different things. Zhang Xiaohu was lying on the kong with his hands behind his head. The expression on his face was either happy or sad. His eyes were fixed on the roof. The shadow of the roof flickered with the flickering light. No one knew what he was thinking. He Tianshu was sitting cross-legged on the kong with his hands and palms facing the sky. He was practicing and regulating his qi circulation. Although he wanted to calm down, the victory during the day always disturbed his practice. After several failed attempts, he completely gave up. He lay on the kong with his clothes on and a smile on his face. He must be recalling his previous victory. Zhang Xiaohua also walked back and forth in the room a few times. Then she got on the kong, sat cross-legged, and practiced the Worry-Free Heart Sutra. In the beginning, Zhang Xiaohua did not draw qi into her body. She just refined the genuine qi in her meridians. Because it seemed that she had not found the qi of heaven and earth in other places except for the medicine field in Huanxi Mountain Villa, Zhang Xiaohua naturally did not have any expectations here. However, after the genuine qi ran for several cycles, Zhang Xiaohua still habitually drew qi into her body. When she used her perception to explore the outside world, she was pleasantly surprised to find that the qi of heaven and earth here was frightening. It was several times more than the medicine field in Huanxi Mountain Villa. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua opened all the pores on her body without hesitation and tried her best to draw the rare qi of heaven and earth into her body. Soon, the qi of heaven and earth around her was completely absorbed by her black hole-like body. Then she felt that there was a lot of qi of heaven and earth coming to her from all directions. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. She calmed down and her state of mind was as calm as an ancient well. She steadily drew qi into her body and refined it in her meridians. Midnight came as promised. Zhang Xiaohua fell asleep in an instant. That breath-like flickering still matched the strange frequency and resonated with the stars in the night sky. Immediately, endless starlight surrounded Zhang Xiaohua and was drawn into her body in an orderly manner and gradually refined. For a long time, Zhang Xiaohua had encountered many problems when practicing Carefree Heart Sutra. Even the simplest method of drawing qi into her body was difficult for her. At first, she thought that it was because of her aptitude that she could not feel the qi. But later, when she practiced in the medicine field and in the woods, which were completely different, a trace of doubt arose in her heart. Perhaps the qi of heaven and earth was also different from the place. Although this was what he thought, and he had also encountered a dense yuan qi of heaven and earth on that rainy night, the Carefree Heart Sutra did not have any explanation for this. This made him even more puzzled. What was this Heart Sutra? It was the crystallization of the predecessor's experience. If such a simple thing was not recorded, how could others practice according to it? At least, there should be a note at the side. Now, in the guest room of the pharmacy hall, Zhang Xiaohua faced this problem again. Once again, she was sure that one sentence of Carefree Heart Sutra was not equivalent to 10,000 sentences. The qi of heaven and earth was indeed related to the place of practice. It was not described in the Heart Sutra that the qi of heaven and earth was endlessly scattered between heaven and earth. Because, although the qi of heaven and earth in the guest room of the pharmacy hall was many times more than that in the medicine field of Huanxi Villa, the qi of heaven and earth in the medicine field was, after all, too little. The qi of heaven and earth in the pharmacy hall was also calculated according to the qi of heaven and earth. Compared to the theoretical description, it was far, far away. Since she had come to this conclusion, Zhang Xiaohua's first thought when she woke up in the morning was to think of the token in He Tianshu's hand. If she had this token, wouldn't her daily practice be much stronger than in Huanxi Villa? Today was already the third day of the martial arts exhibition. Besides the fact that there were too many children in fledgling Eagle Hall, the other competitions in other places had also ended. Naturally, He Tianshu had no other choice. Although Zhang Xiaohua did not acknowledge him as her master, she was still very close to becoming his disciple. If she wanted to compete, as her cheap master, he still had to watch. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua yesterday, He Tianshu did not ask about the results of the competition. This was because he had the same mentality as Zhang Xiaohu. After all, he was from fledgling Eagle Hall and understood the strength of those children better than Zhang Xiaohua. He knew that Zhang Xiaohua was far from being their opponent. He had only come to participate in the martial arts exhibition for fun. Even though Zhang Xiaohua had already learned a little of the ethereal steps Qigong technique and a little of the ethereal steps movement technique, in He Tianqu's mind, Zhang Xiaohua had only learned a little of the concept of the ethereal steps. Naturally, he did not have any extravagant hopes for her. Therefore, he did not think that Zhang Xiaohua would have any good results in the competition. Of course, a result of 6 draws was definitely not a good result. Zhang Xiaohua would not show it off in front of He Tianqiu. In fact, when He Tianqiu came over in the morning and told Zhang Xiaohua that he wanted to go with Zhang Xiaohu to watch Zhang Xiaohua's competition, Zhang Xiaohua said embarrassedly, "Team leader He, you have a lot of things to do in the pharmacy hall. You should be busy with the pharmacy hall's matters. My competition is really nothing to see. You shouldn't go." Hearing this, He Tianqiu was even more certain of his thoughts. He thought to himself, I've seen this kid get beaten up a lot by others. If he had a 30% chance of winning, he wouldn't be so noisy and pull me over. Thinking of this, He Tianqiu said seriously, that won't do. Zhang Xiaohua, no matter what, I can still be considered your first teacher. How can I not watch you compete? Even if it's just a glance at your improvement, I'll be gratified. My efforts were not in vain. If there are any shortcomings, I can teach you properly later. Don't you think so? Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself, where did your efforts come from? Don't talk about the fist technique. You haven't even finished teaching the footwork of the Misty School, let alone the fist technique. However, seeing He Tianqiu's insistence, she could only say, all right. But He Tianqiu still wouldn't let her go. He Tianqiu turned around and raised his eyebrows. Oh right, I forgot. Nie Xiao'er and the others don't seem to have anything going on today. Why don't I pull them over to cheer you on? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and hurriedly said, there's no need, Captain He. It's not good to trouble them. Just as she was about to pull He Tianqiu's sleeve, who knew that He Tianqiu was already prepared. With a tap of his foot, he used the ethereal steps Qigong and slipped away, leaving only a sentence in the air. No trouble. They're happy. As a result, when they came out of the medicine hall, other than Zhang Xiaohua, there were also 4 other people, including Zhang Xiaohu, He Tianqiu, and Nie Xiao'er. The group of 7 people majestically charged towards the Young Eagle Hall. The disciples of the Misty School who saw them along the way were very surprised. The competition was already over. Who were they looking for trouble with? The disciples of the Misty School all came from the Young Eagle Hall and naturally knew that there was still one last day for the competition of the Young Eagle Hall. However, every disciple of the Misty School had participated in the competition of the Young Eagle Hall. Of course, no one was interested. For decades, there had never been an older disciple who came to watch the competition of the Young Eagle Hall. Yesterday, Zhang Xiaohua's competition was watched by Zhang Xiaohu, Changge, and Chen Chen. Not only were the 2 team leaders of Zhang Xiaohua surprised, but the team leaders and disciples in the nearby arenas were also surprised. Today's competition had not officially started yet when they saw Zhang Xiaohua leading 6 adult disciples behind her over. The disciples of the Young Eagle Hall who did not know the truth began whispering. Zhang Xiaohua's ears and eyes were sharp and she had already understood. It was nothing more than, see, I've said it before. Where it's possible to make mistakes, one should be lenient. Don't always kick people around like a ball. Look at this, someone must have lost yesterday and is borrowing people today to get back at them. I know what you mean. If you want to kick them, then so be it. But before you kick them, you have to inquire about the opponent's background. You see, they have someone backing them up in the sect. Isn't this bad? Look, it's probably this kid in front. He must have lost miserably yesterday and is looking for someone to back him up today. He's afraid of being beaten up again. Quickly go find Steward Su and say that someone is coming to make trouble. Xiao', yesterday you secretly ate a drumstick in the kitchen. Look, they're here to catch you. What the hell? Zhang Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry. Team leader Cheng was also dumbfounded. You can't play like this. Yesterday, 3 people came to watch the competition. Today, there are only 6 people. That's almost more than our contestants. What are you doing? Haven't you seen enough of the Young Eagle Hall's competition? Alas, how could he know that this group of people did not have any good intentions? They were all here to see how Zhang Xiaohua would be kicked out of the arena. Otherwise, how could the 5 people's wretched smiling faces cause team leader Cheng to misunderstand? Fortunately, He Tianshu was still somewhat experienced and knowledgeable. Seeing that team leader Chang's expression was not good, he quickly explained that he was from the pharmacy hall and had taught Zhang Xiaohua martial arts. Today, he came to take a look. The other few also practiced fist techniques with Zhang Xiaohua. But how could team leader Cheng believe him? He secretly said in his heart, "Who are you trying to fool? How could I not know Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts footwork? You're from the pharmacy hall, how could you teach it?" However, the martial arts competition was not restricted to onlookers. Team leader Cheng could not say anything and only nodded. Not long after, the time arrived. The competition on the last day of the Young Eagle Hall's martial arts competition officially began. On the arena, the 2 youths' fists and feet danced, attacking and defending well. Everyone below the arena watched with rapt attention. Only Zhang Xiaohu was somewhat absent-minded. From time to time, he would look at the door and secretly say in his heart, why hasn't she come yet? Yesterday, I didn't hear that she wasn't coming today. Could it be that after seeing my embarrassing state yesterday, she didn't want to come today? Did I say something yesterday that made her angry? Or was it presumptuous of me to invite her to dinner yesterday? Did she think that because I don't know internal strength and my martial arts are not good enough, she didn't want to come today? Alas, in short, strange thoughts emerged in his mind from time to time. There was only one purpose, which was to explain why Chang Ge did not come to the Young Eagle Hall today. Just as Zhang Xiaohu's imagination was running wild, several matches had already been fought on the arena. As for how many matches, Zhang Xiaohu naturally could not tell us. At the end of a match, a child was kicked off the arena by his opponent. Leader Cheng announced the result. The other 2 contestants each used their qinggong and floated onto the arena. Everyone praised them. Just as Zhang Xiaohu's attention was slightly shifted to the match on the arena, he heard a beautiful female voice in the distance say, "Hall Master, it's over there. Look, it's the arena with the most people. Yes, it's the one with a lot of tall disciples over there. There's also a disciple who is stupidly watching the match, who is close to the arena." Zhang Xiaohu immediately felt that the sky had just brightened and his mood had just woken up. He cheerfully wanted to turn his head and walk away, but his face was flushed purple. With great difficulty, he restrained himself. After waiting for a few moments, which felt like several eras, he pretended to inadvertently turn his eyes and, just happened, to see Chang Ge and a middle-aged woman who was accompanied by Chang Ge walking over not far away. There was no "and." Even if there was, Zhang Xiaohu would not be able to see it. He immediately put on a happy expression and took a few steps forward. He stepped forward and saluted, "This humble one is Zhang Xiaohu. Greetings, Hall Master Qin." Wasn't the middle-aged woman accompanying Chang Ge the bright green Hall's Aunt Qin? Aunt Qin returned the salute slightly and said with a smile, "Zhang Xiaohu, how are you? We've met before, in the conference hall and at your apprenticeship ceremony. There's no need to be polite. I just came to watch Zhang Xiaohua's competition. Yesterday, Chang Ge told me about Zhang Xiaohua's competition. I was very curious, so I came to watch." Zhang Xiaohu smiled and made a gesture of invitation. He said, "Xiaohua came to compete for fun. Sorry for disturbing Hall Master Qin's time." Aunt Qin waved her hand and said, "It's okay. The initial competition of the martial arts exhibition is over. There's nothing to do in the hall for the time being, so I came to watch." I also think highly of Zhang Xiaohua, so I came to cheer him on. After she finished speaking, she walked to the arena first. However, when she passed by Zhang Xiaohu, she said with a smile, "Oh right, I also liked the story you told yesterday about the bird egg." Zhang Xiaohu was prepared to salute Changgu in a serious manner, but when he heard this, his face turned a little red, and his saluting posture was a little awkward. Changgu was generous. He saluted with a smile and said, "Zhang Xiaohu, the story you told was very good. How about you tell me more when you have time in the future?" There was no reason for Zhang Xiaohu not to be happy. Naturally, he was overjoyed. Even his mouth was crooked from smiling. He said repeatedly, "Of course, if Changgu is willing to listen, I'll be happy to tell you." Changgu felt strange and asked, "Zhang Xiaohu, you were fine just now. Why is your mouth crooked now? Could it be that you're smiling crookedly? Please collect it, thank you." Chapter 179. Zhang Xiaohua and the others were focused on watching the competition in the arena. The square was noisy and they didn't pay attention to the entrance, so they naturally didn't know about Zhang Xiaohua's actions. It wasn't until Aunt Qin and the others walked to their side that they noticed. After everyone greeted each other, Aunt Qin asked, "Zhang Xiaohua, is it time for you to go on stage?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Soon, it should be after this match." Aunt Qin nodded and said, "We're here to cheer for you." Behind Aunt Qin, there were about 5 or 6 female disciples, including Changgu, Chen Chen, and the others. They all cheered for Zhang Xiaohua. These female disciples were the ones who went to the south with the caravan last time. Although they went together last time, Zhang Xiaohua looked like a manservant at that time, so naturally no one paid attention to her. It wasn't until the battle at night that the female disciples had a whole new level of respect for her. Later, when Zhang Xiaohua disappeared, they returned to Mingsue Hall. They had always been very curious about this youth. Yesterday, when they heard that Zhang Xiaohua participated in Kitty Hawk Hall's cotton clothing competition and ended in a draw, they became even more curious. Today, they pestered Aunt Qin and followed her. After the familiar people finished greeting each other, Team Leader Chang and Team Leader Li, who were in charge of the arena, also came over. Aunt Qin was the hall master of Mingsue Hall, so her status was quite high. How could the 2 small team leaders of Kitty Hawk Hall not come over to greet her? Although Aunt Qin was amiable in front of Zhang Xiaohua and the others, she didn't speak kindly to the other members of the Misty School. She calmly returned the greeting and said, "You two should be busy with your own things. I'm just here to watch." The 2 team leaders couldn't help but smile bitterly. "You've brought a group of female disciples with you. In addition to the few who came just now, Zhang Xiaohua's group of relatives and friends is more than the number of people participating in the competition. They've completely surrounded the arena, so how can we not be busy?" However, the competition on the arena was still going on. The 2 team leaders didn't dare to say anything and hurriedly returned. As a result, this year's Kitty Eagle Hall's martial arts exhibition had a very interesting scene. There were many small arenas in the square, and all of them were filled with teenagers and children. Only one arena in the corner was surrounded by adults, gesticulating as they watched the children compete in the arena. Below the arena, the youths participating in the competition were all squeezed into a corner of the arena. There were not even as many of them as there were people who were watching the excitement. This kind of situation in the martial arts exhibition for many years, so it attracted a lot of people. Not long after, it was Zhang Xiaohua's turn to go on stage. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua walk up the escalator to the arena step by step, the spectators weren't surprised. The female disciples of Mingsue Hall had already heard the story of Zhang Xiaohu picking up bird eggs yesterday, so they naturally knew. The people of the pharmacy hall usually stayed with Zhang Xiaohua, so they knew that Zhang Xiaohua didn't know Qigong at all. If she didn't take the escalator, where would she go? Furthermore, Nia Xiao, and the others were looking at each other with narrowed eyebrows, as if they were gloating. They were probably waiting to see Zhang Xiaohua get kicked out of the arena. However, when Zhang Xiaohua started fighting with her opponent, she really displayed her brilliant martial arts on the arena. You attack and I retreat, you retreat and I attack. When you tire me out, I disturb you. When you disturb me, I dodge you. When you disturb me, I dodge you. When you disturb me, I dodge you. Nie Xiao, and the others' eyeballs almost fell to the ground. A few of them secretly thought, could this be the legendary guerrilla tactic? However, below the arena, the most astonished ones were not Nie Xiao, and the rest. As He Tianshu watched, he was rubbing his eyes. He even secretly pinched his own thigh to ascertain if he was dreaming or not. The layman watched for the excitement while the expert watched for the skill. Although Nie Xiao, and the rest were astonished, they were only watching for the excitement. They did not really know the meaning behind Zhang Xiaohua's footwork. He Tianshu was different. He could be said to be Zhang Xiaohua's real master who taught ethereal steps. It was also because he had practiced ethereal steps and had also taught Zhang Xiaohua ethereal steps that he was deeply shocked. Zhang Xiaohua's footwork had already exceeded the scope of what he had taught. On one hand, the footwork that Zhang Xiaohua was displaying now was mostly what he had seen in the ethereal steps secret manual. It was something that he had just comprehended and had not taught to Zhang Xiaohua. There were also some that he had not fully comprehended and was still pondering over in his heart. Others might not have felt anything, but when He Tianshu saw it, he immediately felt enlightened. Many of the questions in the footwork had been answered in an instant. On the other hand, he had already taught Zhang Xiaohua earlier. But now, when Zhang Xiaohua was displaying it, there had already been a huge change. It was not the same as what he remembered. For ordinary martial arts, if there was a mistake in displaying it, one would be able to see the flaw at a glance. But Zhang Xiaohua's display was flawless and there was no flaw to speak of. Therefore, He Tianshu could not be sure if this display was wrong. Suddenly, a thought flashed in He Tianshu's mind. Am I the one who is teaching Zhang Xiaohua ethereal steps? Or is it Zhang Xiaohua who is teaching me? He Tianshu did not have enough time to ponder over his question. The time for an incense stick to burn was up and Zhang Xiaohua's match was naturally a draw. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua jump down from the stage, Nie Xiao'er and the rest surrounded her with a whoosh. They laughed and said, Zhang Xiaohua, I didn't expect you to be so powerful. Just relying on this incomplete fist technique and inexplicable footwork, you were actually able to fight to a draw with your opponent. Our brothers were even prepared to receive you outside the stage. It seems like our efforts were in vain. Zhang Xiaohua giggled and cupped her hands, lucky, lucky. Ashamed, ashamed. Zhang Xiaohua squeezed her way out and saw He Tianshu with his eyes closed as if he was thinking about something. She did not dare to disturb him and walked in front of Aunt Qin. Aunt Qin praised her with a smile. In just over a month's time, you were able to comprehend ethereal steps to such a level. It is truly worthy of celebration. Zhang Xiaohua modestly replied, it is all because of Captain He's good teachings. I am still a bit stupid and was unable to learn Qigong. Aunt Qin said, it is not bad to learn the footwork first. However, I see that you have yet to reach the realm of large success. This ethereal steps and your fist technique have yet to merge well together. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, that's right. I don't know why, but these two martial arts cannot be merged together. It seems like I still have to practice more. Aunt Qin nodded and said, if you can merge these two martial arts, then you will be like a tiger that has grown wings. Winning the competition should not be a problem. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly felt someone pulling her. Turning around, she saw He Tianshu. After He Tianshu pulled Zhang Xiaohua to a corner, he carefully asked, Zhang Xiaohua, did someone teach you ethereal steps? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and shook her head. He Tianshu asked again, then you didn't show ethereal steps to anyone, right? Zhang Xiaohua still shook her head. Only then did He Tianshu heave a sigh of relief. However, his suspicions grew as he asked again, since no one taught you, and you didn't consult anyone about the ethereal steps, how did you manage to learn the footwork after the ethereal steps? Zhang Xiaohua finally understood He Tianshu's worries and whispered, Captain He, I really didn't ask anyone and no one taught me. Didn't you show me the footwork after that? I memorized it in my heart and took some time to practice it. He Tianshu opened his mouth wide and said, You learned it after practicing it? Aren't you afraid of biting your tongue? I tried to comprehend it for a long time but still couldn't comprehend it. You learned it after practicing it for a while. Aren't you slapping me in the face? Zhang Xiaohua's face turned red as she waved her hands and said, I didn't mean it that way. I really learned it myself. Maybe I practiced it 5 or 6 times. He Tianshu wanted to choose not to believe her words, but the truth was right in front of his eyes. He had no choice but to believe it. He still didn't give up and asked, Then why did the footwork I taught you change when you stepped on it? That. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't explain it and said, I don't know either. Captain He, I still remember when you taught me. When I practiced it, it changed. I couldn't practice it back no matter how hard I tried. He Tianshu was speechless. Why did he continue to ask? Therefore, He Tianshu thought for a while and said to her, Zhang Xiaohua, I won't watch the rest of the competition. The footwork you showed just now inspired me a lot. I have to go back and study it now. I believe that with your performance just now, it won't be a problem to get a draw for the rest of the competition. When Zhang Xiaohua heard that her footwork inspired He Tianshu, she was very happy and said, Then you should go back and study it quickly. Don't forget it again. He Tianshu listened, nodded, and turned to leave. But he was pulled back by Zhang Xiaohua and asked embarrassedly, Captain He, can you give me the pharmaceutical hall's token? I still want to stay in your guest room tonight. He Tianshu didn't hesitate. He took out the token from his pocket and handed it to her, then hurriedly left. When Zhang Xiaohua walked back to the arena, Aunt Qin also smiled and said goodbye to her. Zhang Xiaohua, I won't stay to watch. Yesterday, I heard from Chang'e that you drew 3 rounds. I was very curious and wanted to come and cheer you on. I hope you can win. But now that I know the reason, I think your next few rounds will also be draws. Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head and said, If nothing unexpected happens, it should be a draw. I really don't know how to defeat this group of little boy. They're really strong. Aunt Qin said, You're the strong one. How long have you practiced martial arts and how long have they practiced martial arts? They're probably worried about not being able to defeat you. Zhang Xiaohua didn't comment. Aunt Qin said again, There are still some trivial matters at Mingsue Hall. I'll go back first. When you have time, come find me at Mingsue Hall. Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, Okay, big sister Qin. I'll go when I have time. Aunt Qin nodded and prepared to leave. The female disciples of Mingsue Hall, Chang'e and Chen Chen, had already seen 3 draws yesterday. Today, they were going to watch another round. Zhang Xiaohua's method of competition was refreshing when they watched the first round, but after watching it too many times, it would all be the same. There was no point in watching it anymore. They came today purely to follow the hall master to join in the fun. As for the other female disciples, seeing that their hall master wanted to leave, they didn't plan to stay either. Thus, under Aunt Qin's lead, all the female disciples of Mingsue Hall left. Zhang Xiaohu watched Chang'e and the others leave. He felt a little disappointed. He turned to Zhang Xiaohua and said, Xiaohua, you can compete here. I don't think you'll lose. I didn't go back yesterday and have to go back to take a look. I won't stay here to watch you compete. Zhang Xiaohua grinned and said, Do what you need to do, second brother. I'll go find you after the competition tonight. Zhang Xiaohu also left. Zhang Xiaohua turned around and saw Nie Er and the others surrounding him. He hurriedly said, Second brother, are you leaving too? Nie Er came over and put his arm around his shoulder. He said intimately, how can we? We're good brothers. We'll definitely support you until the end. Zhang Xiaohua shrunk his shoulders and said, don't, second brother. Looking at your smile, it's very fake. Is there something wrong? If there's something, just say it. If you don't say it, how will I know if I can answer you? If I can't answer you, second brother, you can't force me. Niaer's face was full of awkwardness as he pinched his face and said in puzzlement, how can you tell? But then he said, I do have something to tell you. But, it's not just me. Everyone is very surprised and wants me to ask. Zhang Xiaohua blinked and said, say it. I'm listening. Niaer looked at the people beside him and said, I represent the brothers who usually fight with you in the medicine field to ask you a question. What's the name of the martial arts you used on the stage? Big Dipper Magical Fist. Zhang Xiaohua said without hesitation, didn't I tell you guys before? Niaer shook his head and said, don't divert our attention. Zhang Xiaohua, this won't work here. I'm not talking about your random fist technique. I'm talking about your footwork. We thought it was very familiar. It seems to be similar to the one Captain He used. Zhang Xiaohua asked, you guys didn't ask Captain He? Niaer curled his lips and said, we asked, but he didn't say. That's why we wanted to ask you. Zhang Xiaohua heard and said decisively, then, I won't tell you guys either. Niaer came up with a sullen face and said, we're all good brothers. What's so hard to say? Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, this is my privacy and secret. Why should I tell you guys? Niaer still smiled and said, good brothers don't have any secrets. You can share with us what you know. We can also share with you what we know. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes and said, you said it. You have to tell me what you know. Niaer heard and his face changed. He felt that he was tricked by Zhang Xiaohua. But thinking about it, what could he do that could make Zhang Xiaohua remember? So he gathered his courage and asked, what do you want to ask? Zhang Xiaohua narrowed her eyes and whispered into Niaer's ear, you tell me about the forbidden area of the potion hall, and I'll tell you about the footwork. Niaer jumped up as if he was bitten by a snake. His face changed and he hurriedly said, this is our Misty School's secret. You're not a disciple of the Misty School. If I tell you, I'll be punished by the gang. Forget it, I don't want to hear your secret. Just pretend I didn't ask. Zhang Xiaohua saw Niaer's reaction and immediately pulled on his sleeve and said, don't go, brother heir. Since you don't want to answer this question, I'll make another request. What do you think? Niaer looked at Zhang Xiaohua suspiciously and said, why do I feel that you're up to no good? But as long as it doesn't involve the gang's rules or secrets, I'll try my best to agree. Zhang Xiaohua said, if you teach me 10 sets of knife or sword skills, I'll tell you the secret. 10 sets? Niaer almost shouted. Are you kidding me? That's our Misty School's secret. How can I teach it to you? Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly explained, I don't need you to teach me Misty Schools. As long as it's knife or sword skills, it's fine. It's fine as long as it's common in the pugilistic world. Oh, Niaer nodded and said, I see. As long as it's knife or sword skills, it's fine. I don't need Misty Schools. Yes, that's right. Zhang Xiaohua confirmed again. But, Niaer said again, 10 sets is too much. I don't know that many. How about 2 sets? Zhang Xiaohua said, hee, you don't have to be the only one. There's still them. As long as you gather 10 sets, it'll be fine. Zhang Xiaohua winked at the people beside her. Niaer looked at the crowd, gritted his teeth and said, no, 10 sets is too much. How about 8? We'll teach you 2 sets each. Deal. Zhang Xiaohua said without hesitation. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua and Niaer's palms hit each other. Then, Zhang Xiaohua casually said, I thought that each of you would teach 1 set. Who knew that each of you would teach 2 sets? I've really struck it rich. When Nie heard that, he almost blacked out and sat on the ground. Nie didn't faint under the support of the crowd. Then, his mouth trembled as he asked, "We've already agreed to your conditions. Now, you can tell us your secret." Zhang Xiaohua smiled mysteriously and said, "Of course. I'm a kind person. Since you've set an example, I'll definitely tell you. Listen carefully. The movement technique that Captain He and I are using is called ethereal steps." Ah! The few of them were shocked when they heard that. Nie still didn't believe her and asked, "Ethereal steps? This is one of the 3 divine techniques of our Misty School. Even Captain He doesn't have the qualifications to cultivate it. How do you know this divine technique? You're not lying to us, right?" Zhang Xiaohua's face was full of injustice and said, "Brother Little Heir, how can you doubt my character like this? When have I ever lied to you? It's really ethereal steps. It's not fake at all. Think about it. If it's not the magical ethereal steps, what other movement technique can let Captain He's movement technique improve so much in such a short period of time? Can it let me compete with this group of greedy little boy and not lose?" When Nie heard these few reasons, he had already believed a little in his heart. However, he still wanted to get to the bottom of it and asked, "Then, how did you and Captain He learn it?" Looking at Nie and the rest who were thirsting for an answer, Zhang Xiaohua said proudly, "It's not that I don't want to tell you. But this sect leader O said that this matter cannot be told to anyone. If you're not afraid of being punished by the sect rules, then I'll tell you." When everyone heard that, their faces changed and with a pu sound, they all vomited out a mouthful of blood and fell onto the ground. After messing around for so long, everyone had to teach Zhang Xiaohua 2 sets of sword techniques in exchange for 3 words. Chapter 180. Nie Xiao and the others, who had been teased by Zhang Xiaohua, were no longer in the mood to watch the competition in the arena. They stayed for a while longer before leaving. Zhang Xiaohua watched them stagger away and couldn't help but feel a little guilty. He thought to himself, "Did I go overboard?" The dazzling arena in Kitty Hawk Hall finally regained its calm. Leader Cheng also heaved a sigh of relief. Steward Su must have seen the commotion in the morning. He didn't know if his handling was appropriate, if his response was steady, and if it could enter Steward Su's discerning eyes. The other children in the audience were very happy. Anyone who was surrounded by a group of people wouldn't feel good. Moreover, this group of people was their opponent's support group. Now, it was good. The sky was high and the clouds were light. It was quiet and they could concentrate on the competition. Putting aside Zhang Xiaohua's guilt, Leader Chang's nervousness, and the children's relaxation, when Nie Xiao, and the others staggered out of Kitty Hawk Hall and turned at the intersection, they immediately straightened their backs. Someone said, "I didn't expect this Zhang Xiaohua to be so difficult to deal with now. I originally wanted to get some information out of him and make him leak some information. In the end, he was even more difficult to deal with than He Tianshu. He just kept his mouth shut, but he used 3 words to exchange for 8 sets of sword techniques." Another person also said, "That's right. Zhang Xiaohua is no longer the same as before. He's no longer the country child we just met. That's right. The way he was bullied by Ma Jing'er back then is still vivid in my mind. That's right. He also needs to grow and mature. If he still looks like he's being bullied, can he still survive in Jianghu? If he doesn't wash up early, it's better for him to go home and farm. That's true. However, after being played by this kid, I always feel uncomfortable. Brother Xiao, do we really have to each teach him a set of sword techniques?" Nie Xiao, nodded with a sinister smile on his face. He said, "Why not? We've already promised him. Why don't we teach him? Forget it, this is not the image of the wise second brother in our hearts. Hurry up and tell us, what good plan do you have?" Before Nie Xiao'er could say anything, he let out a complacent laugh, causing everyone's hearts to itch even more. Seeing everyone's anxious looks, Nie Xiao'er said slowly, "We said that we would teach Zhang Xiaohua swordsmanship, but we didn't say how. There are many ways to teach, and teaching by example is just one of them. Besides, with Zhang Xiaohua's comprehension, if he was still the same as before, he would forget 8 out of 10 moves you taught him. We would be exhausted to death. Also, we only talked about teaching him, but we didn't say that we have to teach him. I think there are 2 ways. First, he would practice 2 sets of swordsmanship in front of him. Who cared if he could learn it or not? The second was to find a few sword manuals and throw them to him so that he could read them by himself. This was also a way to teach martial arts. In short, he has a good plan, and I have a way out. What can Zhang Xiaohua do to us?" Everyone clapped their hands and praised him. Only then did they happily puff out their chests and leave. Zhang Xiaohua from fledgling Eagle Hall did not know that he had been schemed against again. He was still secretly feeling guilty for going overboard. Alas, the older the ginger, the spicier it was. There was no need to deceive him. Zhang Xiaohua's remaining matches, to be honest, were really not worth mentioning. Although his opponents were different, his methods were the same. His guerrilla tactics were the same. Naturally, the results of the matches were the same. If it was not for the fact that he had to fight according to the rules, his opponents and Leader Cheng would have discussed it with him and called it a draw. Why waste time? That incense was also a copper coin. It would be a pity to waste it. When Leader Cheng announced a draw, Zhang Xiaohua and his opponent jumped down from the arena. Zhang Xiaohua's group's matches in the martial arts exhibition were considered to have ended. Zhang Xiaohua completed his journey in the martial arts exhibition with a record of 9 matches and 9 draws. Then, Leader Cheng and Leader Li were copying and calculating something. The group of children beside them were anxiously staring at them. Zhang Xiaohua, who was bored to death, suddenly understood that this group of children were waiting for his match results. They had practiced martial arts hard for a few years and competed for 3 days with difficulty. Wasn't it all to pass this cotton-clothed first-rank test? Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua felt a little uneasy. He had participated in this competition only to test himself. To put it bluntly, it was just for fun. However, would it affect one of these children because of his participation? If it affected someone, wouldn't it be very bad? At this time, Zhang Xiaohua also seemed to understand. On the first day, when the fledgling Eagle Hall's disciples had stared at him, they had some opinions in their eyes. However, when Zhang Xiaohua thought of his miserable record, he felt relieved. How could this kind of result block anyone's path? Not long after, Leader Cheng stopped writing and picked up a piece of paper. He had a complicated expression on his face as he looked at the group of little faces in front of him. Then, he glanced at Zhang Xiaohua, who was slightly further away from him with a strange expression. Only then did he open his mouth and say, "The results of this time's Commoner Cloak Rank 1 competition are out. There are 4 disciples who directly advanced to Commoner Cloak Rank 1. They are respectively." Subsequently, Leader Cheng called out the names of the 4 disciples including Mu Tangchun. When the names were called, the 4 people's faces immediately glowed with joy. The other disciples were unhappy and asked one after another, "Leader Cheng, didn't 5 of our disciples directly break through? How come there are only 4? Leader Cheng explained, "Every year, the rule is that the 5 disciples who are ranked in the top 5 directly advance. But this year's 5th place." At this point, Leader Cheng pointed to Zhang Xiaohua, who was standing in the distance, and said helplessly, "This 5th place is disciple number 250, Zhang Xiaohua, who came from Huanxi Manor to participate in our martial arts exhibition." Hearing this, the remaining disciples looked angrily at Zhang Xiaohua. If those gazes were replaced with swords, Zhang Xiaohua's body would immediately be pierced with numerous transparent holes. Even if he used ethereal steps, he would not be able to escape. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, it would be a lie to say that he was not happy. To be able to achieve such a result among this group of talented disciples really made him proud. It was also unexpected. But if it was because he took up one of the other people's advancement quota, that was also something that Zhang Xiaohua was unwilling to do. Seeing that the disciples wanted to vent their anger on Zhang Xiaohua, Leader Cheng hurriedly said, although there are 4 people who directly advanced, according to the rules of the martial arts exhibition, we can recommend 2 disciples who have the strength of a commoner first stage to advance. Just now, I had a discussion with Leader Li. Considering the uniqueness of our group, we are prepared to recommend 3 disciples to make up for Zhang Xiaohua's direct advancement quota. When the disciples heard this, they cheered again. Zhang Xiaohua also showed a happy smile. Zhang Xiaohua walked in front of Leader Cheng and prepared to salute and leave. He said, Leader Cheng, thank you for taking care of me these past few days. This martial arts exhibition is over, I should return to Huanxi Manor. I hope I can still come to participate in the competition next year. The disciples were dizzy and secretly said in their hearts, this guy is really bad. He didn't cause enough trouble this year and is still thinking about next year. We must practice martial arts well and wait for next year to beat him until he is looking for his teeth on the ground. Leader Cheng was very puzzled and asked, Zhang Xiaohua, what do you mean by these words? You clearly passed the first stage. Listening to your tone, you want to return to Huanxi Manor and not participate in tomorrow's competition? There's still a competition tomorrow. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and asked, isn't the martial arts exhibition ending today? Our competition is over. What kind of competition is there tomorrow? Only then did Leader Cheng know that Zhang Xiaohua in front of him didn't seem to know the content of the martial arts exhibition, so he patiently explained to him, our Misty School's martial arts exhibition is divided into 3 stages. It is commonly known as the 3 stages. The first stage is the competition that you will participate in these 3 days. It is to win in the group competition and determine the rank of the disciples. For example, Mu Tangchun and the others are now rank 1 commoner. The second round will be decided by the winners of the first round. This round doesn't include the recommended disciples we just mentioned. They will compete in one-on-one matches to determine the top 10 disciples. These 10 disciples will receive special rewards. Then these 10 disciples will have the qualification to pass the 3rd stage. The 3rd stage is the challenge stage. These 10 disciples can challenge any disciple of the higher rank. If they win or draw, they will obtain a higher rank. This time, Zhang Xiaohua understood that he had just passed the first stage. He asked curiously, Leader Cheng, I only came to Huanxi Manor to participate in the martial arts exhibition. It has nothing to do with the advancement of your Misty School's disciples. Will I also participate in the next 2 stages? Leader Cheng nodded and said, ever since you participated in our group's competition, I specially checked the previous records. Although there hasn't been an outsider participating in the martial arts exhibition in the past few decades, there were still many outsiders who participated enthusiastically 100 years ago. Moreover, there were also many people who entered the 2nd and 3rd stages. However, there is one thing that I have seen in the records. These outsiders who advanced were mostly people with a certain amount of fame in the Jianghu. After joining the Lotus Escort Agency, they participated in the martial arts exhibition. Their martial arts skills were quite high and their results, to be honest, were much better than yours. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and didn't deny his results, saying, in other words, I have to participate in tomorrow's competition. Leader Cheng smiled and said, of course. Why else would I remind you? However, according to your results, it's fine if you don't participate. In the next 2 stages, the first stage is limited to the time it takes for 3 incense sticks to burn and the other stage is unlimited. Your method of competition may not be advantageous anymore. In any case, you were able to pass the first stage, which is already not bad. I suggest that you don't need to pass the next 2 stages. That's right, the 2 disciples from the Lotus Escort Agency who came with you to participate in the martial arts exhibition have already withdrawn from the competition yesterday. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know that there would be a competition tomorrow and didn't intend to compete with this group of children for a place. However, she had just received the pharmacy hall's token from He Tianshu this morning. If she didn't compete tomorrow, she would probably have to return it tonight. Thinking of the heaven and earth yuan qi in the pharmacy hall, Zhang Xiaohua was a little reluctant to part with it. Moreover, this leader Cheng was really too much. It's fine if you didn't tell me that there would be a competition tomorrow, but you first told me and then advised me not to participate. Isn't it just because my matches are always tied? Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua was a little unhappy and asked, then, if I participate and enter the top 10, won't I take up another place in your Kitty Hawk Hall? Leader Cheng was very fond of Zhang Xiaohua asking this kind of question that didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. It was a good opportunity to test his knowledge. He said, no, it's recorded very clearly in the records. If you can enter the top 10, you will be given a place alone. Our Kitty Hawk Hall disciples will still choose 10 disciples. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she said resolutely, then I'll come back tomorrow to participate. Oh. Leader Cheng was a little surprised and said, are you sure? Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, of course I'm sure. It doesn't matter if I lose. If I win, I can still compete with the commoner second stage disciples. I won't lose anything, so why wouldn't I come? When Leader Cheng saw that Zhang Xiaohua had decided, he didn't try to persuade her anymore. He told her to come to Kitty Hawk Hall as usual tomorrow. Only then did Zhang Xiaohua say goodbye and leave. After leaving Kitty Hawk Hall, Zhang Xiaohua's first thought was to go to the medicine hall. However, after thinking about it, her second brother was still in Misty School. She had no reason to go anywhere else first. She could only follow the original path back to Zhang Xiaohu's residence. The door to Zhang Xiaohu's small courtyard was still closed. Zhang Xiaohua walked to the door and knocked on it. When there was no response, she impatiently shouted, second brother, it's me. As expected, the door opened. Zhang Xiaohua walked in and said unhappily, second brother, do you have to close the door every day? If they keep coming to flatter you, are you going to close the door for the rest of your life? At this moment, Zhang Xiaohu's face was covered in sweat. He wiped it slightly and said, I don't know either. I'll just close the door first. My martial arts are too inferior right now. I can't raise my head in front of others. I really don't have any better ideas, so I can only do this. Only then did Zhang Xiaohua notice that her second brother's head was covered in sweat. She asked in shock, second brother, why are you sweating so much? What are you doing? What am I doing? Zhang Xiaohu bitterly smiled and walked to the empty space in the courtyard. He practiced the 6 harmonies fist technique that he was proficient in. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to disturb him. She sat on the small stone stool and watched quietly. However, after watching for a long time, Zhang Xiaohu struck again and again without stopping. His sweat flowed down like water. Zhang Xiaohua felt that something was wrong and shouted, second brother, stop and rest for a while. However, Zhang Xiaohu turned a deaf ear to her words. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, he became anxious. He jumped up from the small stone stool and jumped into the range of Zhang Xiaohu's moves. Using his left hand to block Zhang Xiaohu's fist, he used his right hand to execute the fist of the North Star and attack Zhang Xiaohu's side. When Zhang Xiaohu saw his younger brother's fist close in, he didn't reply and swung his fist to meet it. Zhang Xiaohua didn't avoid the stiff collision. He felt that his second brother's fist was very heavy. It seemed like he was really going to use his full strength. How could Zhang Xiaohua be afraid? His hand also became heavier, so the two of them started fighting. After fighting for the time it took for 2 sticks of incense to burn, Zhang Xiaohua didn't feel that it was too strenuous. After all, his arms were very strong now. He didn't need to use any inner strength to punch. On the other hand, Zhang Xiaohu was different. In the past, He had inner strength as a foundation, but now, he had completely abandoned the low-level inner strength cultivation method. Now, he was relying on his physical strength to fight with Zhang Xiaohua. How could he be Zhang Xiaohua's opponent? If it wasn't for Zhang Xiaohua intentionally going easy on him, Zhang Xiaohu would have been knocked to the ground by his younger brother. Seeing that his second brother's fists weren't as heavy as they were at the beginning, and that his face was already showing signs of fatigue, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to continue fighting. He showed an opening under his armpit, just in time to meet Zhang Xiaohu's fist. With a peng sound, Zhang Xiaohua was sent flying. He cried out, "Io!" This cry of pain fell into Zhang Xiaohu's ears. He immediately stopped fighting and ran over to Zhang Xiaohua. He carefully helped him up and anxiously asked, "You're injured under your armpit, right? How is it? Does it hurt a lot?" When Zhang Xiaohua saw his second brother's anxious appearance, he secretly laughed in his heart. However, he didn't dare to reveal any flaws. He only furrowed his brows and said, "Second brother, I was kind enough to spar with you. How could you be so cruel? I'm your biological younger brother. Even if your martial arts are high, you shouldn't bully me like this. Io, it hurts." Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly smiled and said, "Xiaohua, it's all my fault. I'm in a bad mood today and wasn't careful. Take a deep breath and see if your chest is stuffy. If it's not, let's hurry to the medicine hall. I don't want to hurt you." Zhang Xiaohua deliberately took a deep breath and then exhaled. He closed his eyes for a while and said, "It's fine, second brother. It doesn't seem like my chest is uncomfortable. It's just that the place you hit hurts." Second brother, what's there to be in a bad mood about? You're being so cruel to your own younger brother. Oh right, you're sweating all over. Have you been practicing since this morning? Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and then silently nodded. Zhang Xiaohua touched his armpit and said, "Second brother, help me over. Let's sit on the stone bench and talk." Zhang Xiaohua looked hurt, so Zhang Xiaohu could only carefully help him over to the stone bench. After sitting down, Zhang Xiaohua said, "Second brother, I've been competing all day. Can you give me some water to drink?" When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he silently brought out a teacup and tea from the room. Zhang Xiaohua took it and poured out 2 cups of tea. She handed it to Zhang Xiaohu and said, "Second brother, you drink some too." Zhang Xiaohu looked at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "You drink too." When Zhang Xiaohua picked up the cup, Zhang Xiaohu drank it. Both of them drank the water and put down the cups. Zhang Xiaohua then asked, "Second brother, what's going on? Who told you to practice non-stop since you came back?" Zhang Xiaohu looked up at the sky and seemed to be thinking about something. Then, he poured a cup of tea and said as he drank, "Actually, little blossom, it's nothing. It's just that, sigh, it's just that I feel very useless. Look at you, you didn't have a master and you didn't learn the fist techniques completely, but you still persevered in practicing martial arts and pieced those incomplete fist techniques together. You actually succeeded in practicing them. Moreover, look at your current level of martial arts. Even the disciples of the ethereal sect aren't a match for you. You're much stronger than me. Please add it to your collection, thank you." Chapter 181. Zhang Xiaohu really had a heavy burden on his mind. During his time in the Misty School, he was in a very difficult situation. Many of the righteous disciples thought that he had entered the Misty School through nepotism, so they treated him neither coldly nor warmly. Some even spoke ill of him. On the other hand, there were those who wanted to curry favor with him, which made him feel extremely disgusted. But even if he hated them, he had just entered the Misty School. He really didn't know where they came from, so he didn't dare to offend them. Therefore, his days in the Misty School were very difficult. He had no choice but to close the door. And these difficulties in dealing with people and relationships were just side effects for Zhang Xiaohu. The key was that after when Wenhai brought him into the Misty School, he didn't care about him and just let him live and die on his own. They had met a few times before, and he had asked Zhang Xiaohua for the reckless bull force. Later on, they had distanced themselves from each other. Even if they did meet, he wouldn't talk about martial arts training. This made Zhang Xiaohu very puzzled, and he couldn't understand his master's thoughts. Time passed bit by bit. Until today, when he saw Zhang Xiaohua show off his invincible might in the arena and fight evenly with the Misty School disciples, Zhang Xiaohu's mixed feelings were completely overturned. Zhang Xiaohu had always thought that he had good luck and was more talented than his younger brother, so he was ahead of him in the path of martial arts training. But today, he realized that he was wrong, very wrong. His younger brother had long since run ahead of him, leaving him far behind. He had an indescribable feeling in his heart. If one were to say that he was jealous, perhaps there was a little, but this was after all his younger brother by blood. Zhang Xiaohu saw his improvement and was mainly shocked and self-pitying. Thinking about his own situation, thinking about his stagnant martial arts, he seemed to feel a kind of suffocation. Yes, it was as if an invisible hand was choking his neck, making it hard for him to breathe. Zhang Xiaohu did not like this feeling. In order to vent his frustrations, he went back to the small courtyard and shut the door. He buried himself in hard practice, practicing the 6 harmony fists that he was best at. Only when he continuously practiced the 6 harmony fists like the palm of his hand, did he have some confidence to comfort his hurt heart. As for the reason for his injury, Zhang Xiaohu had to admit from the bottom of his heart that it was really not because he saw that his younger brother's martial arts were stronger than his. It was because he felt from the bottom of his heart that his martial arts were too low. His character and appearance were ordinary. His background was lowly. He really could not take out anything that could catch the eye of that person. As such, how could he attract the attention of others? The more Zhang Xiaohu thought about it, the more his heart ached. And the more his heart ached, the more he couldn't stop his hands. He only stopped when Zhang Xiaohua knocked on the door and called him. His whole body was covered in sweat, as if he had just been fished out of the water. Zhang Xiaohu's reason was very far-fetched, but also very practical. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know how to answer him. If it was any ordinary martial arts, he would definitely pass it on to his second brother without hesitation. But what he had learned, other than the Big Dipper magical fist, were all from Misty School. Sect leader O had made it very clear that he couldn't pass it on to others and could only practice it himself. And what he relied on in the arena, other than the ethereal steps, was the Big Dipper magical fist, and the strength of his 2 arms. To Zhang Xiaohu, these were things that couldn't be replicated. The Big Dipper magical fist wasn't the key to defeating the enemy, and it wasn't something that Zhang Xiaohu was willing to learn. He would rather practice his own Liu Quan. Zhang Xiaohua sighed, not knowing how to comfort his second brother. Thinking about it, Zhang Xiaohua was only a teenager. How could he have much experience for his older second brother to refer to? Thus, the 2 brothers could only drink their tea in silence. Zhang Xiaohua really wanted to tell his second brother that he had passed the 2nd stage of the martial arts exhibition, but if he told him this joyous news now, it would only hurt his pride again. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua could only be a taciturn gourd. While drinking tea, Zhang Xiaohu suddenly saw Zhang Xiaohua nimbly pick up the teacup with her right hand. His heart couldn't help but tremble, and he asked with a trembling voice, "Xiaohua, your right hand?" Zhang Xiaohua stared blankly. Looking at her hand that was holding the teacup, she suddenly understood and said with a smile, "Second brother, that's right, I haven't come to see you in this period of time. I forgot to tell you that my hand was basically healed last month. Look at me now." As she spoke, she nimbly moved her hand and said, "It's completely healed. I don't feel any discomfort at all. That's right, I even exchanged a punch with a fledgling Eagle Hall disciple today. There were no problems." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he was extremely happy. He didn't know if the gloominess just now was because he had vented out from the punch or because he had heard the news that Zhang Xiaohua's hand was healed, but it was dispelled. His mouth repeatedly said good, and the biggest stone in his heart was finally lifted. When he had heard the doctor of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency say that Zhang Xiaohua's right hand might be crippled in the future, there had always been a huge knot in his heart. He didn't know how his parents would feel if they knew this news, and how he would face them. Now, everything was fine. Oh. The dark night sky was actually so beautiful. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohu felt a bit guilty and said, Xiaohua, you've already been healed for a month, but second brother only just saw. Second brother didn't take good care of you. If the two hadn't seen each other for a long time, Zhang Xiaohu wouldn't have paid attention. However, Zhang Xiaohua had just come over a month ago, and she had been with him for the past 2 days. He actually didn't see her. This was something that Zhang Xiaohu didn't want to forgive himself. However, Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said, It's nothing, second brother. I've grown up and can take care of myself. You're not in an unfamiliar environment right now, so you should take care of yourself first. Looking at your appearance just now, it was really scary. You're not the same as when you were in the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. I remember that when you first learned the 6 he fists, you were very confident. You used this fist technique to compete with other people's bodyguards, and you never lost. Why are you so discouraged now? The speaker didn't mean it, but the listener did. Zhang Xiaohu's heart moved when he heard this. That's right, back then, he had nothing. He didn't have a master or a sect. He only had someone teach him the simple 6 he fists, and he could learn it with relish. Moreover, he was proficient in the 6 he fists and dared to challenge the strong. But today, he had already entered the Misty School and found the master that he had always dreamed of. There was a path to heaven in front of him. Although his master hadn't taught him anything, based on the foundation of the Misty School, even if they didn't teach him any secret techniques, it would definitely be 100 times better than the 6 he fists or the trash internal strength that he had cultivated. He felt sorry for himself because of a little neglect, blamed the heavens and blamed others. He didn't even pay attention to his younger brother's injuries. Was such a Zhang Xiaohu still the same person? Could he cultivate to a high level of martial arts with such a mentality? Even if he cultivated to a high level of martial arts, could he still be happy? Moreover, if he only cared about himself and didn't care about others, would he be able to win someone's heart? A series of self-questioning caused Zhang Xiaohu's expression to constantly change. In the end, a smile appeared on Zhang Xiaohu's face. He had really thought it through. Whether it was martial arts or power, they were just a part of life. Family and friendship were the key to life. If he treated martial arts and power as his everything, then he would lose the joy of life. The true meaning of life was nothing more than enjoying life. Using martial arts and power as embellishments in life, whether others praised or belittled them, they shouldn't affect his magnanimous heart. Only in this way could he truly control his own life. Seeing Zhang Xiaohu's smile, Zhang Xiaohua was a little surprised. She asked, Second brother, what are you thinking about? Why are you so happy? Zhang Xiaohu still smiled and didn't say anything. He said, It's nothing. It's just that when I thought about how your right hand has recovered, the stone in my heart also fell. I don't have to worry about you anymore. Oh, right, how was the result of your competition today? Don't tell me it's still 3 draws. Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head embarrassedly. She said, Second brother, can you think of another result? Zhang Xiaohu chuckled and asked, Then you're not going back to Huanxi Mountain Villa today, right? Are you going back early tomorrow morning? Zhang Xiaohua smiled mysteriously. She said, You guessed wrong, oh. Zhang Xiaohu was surprised. He looked up at the sky and said, It's already late. It's not appropriate for you to go back now. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head again. Zhang Xiaohu was puzzled. He said, Are you going to go back tomorrow night? Zhang Xiaohua said, Guess again. Zhang Xiaohu said, It's up to you to say it or not. Anyway, this is where I live. I don't need to leave. If you have the ability, you can also live here. Zhang Xiaohua chuckled. She said, do you really not know, or are you pretending not to know? Or, do you not believe that your dearest little brother can enter the second round of the martial arts exhibition? The second round of the martial arts exhibition. Zhang Xiaohu opened his mouth wide and asked in surprise, I really don't know. Moreover, is what you said true? You entered the second round? With your 9 fights and 9 draws? Zhang Xiaohua chuckled and said embarrassedly, I don't know what the other people's results were. However, Leader Cheng told me that I was the last person to enter the second round. Zhang Xiaohu said excitedly, even if you're the last person, you're still the best of fledgling Eagle Hall. Xiaohua, you're really stronger than me now. This sentence was said with sincerity, and it did not make Zhang Xiaohua feel as gloomy as he did earlier. Then, Zhang Xiaohua told Zhang Xiaohu about the second round of the martial arts exhibition that Leader Cheng had told her. After listening, Zhang Xiaohu closed his door and thought for a while. He said, Xiaohua, I reckon that the second round will not be as easy to pass as the first round. Not to mention that the disciples who entered the second round are all outstanding. Every one of them has a higher cultivation than you. Moreover, the time it takes for 2 incense sticks to burn is enough for them to use different techniques to attack you and test you. Don't forget, which one of these disciples doesn't have a unique skill? It's not like the first round, which only has the time it takes for 1 incense stick to burn. Moreover, the second round only has an elimination system. There are no draws. It seems that your strategy of shrinking back in the first round is not working. Zhang Xiaohua was not annoyed. She said, I'm not as good as them. I've always admitted this. I was lucky to be able to enter the second round. Finally, I can stay in the Misty School for a while. It's also good to be with you. Zhang Xiaohu put down his teacup and said, you just want to see the level of the others in the second round. Why do you have to drag me in? If you want to see me, you can just come. As long as you have the Huanxi Villa token, the gate of Misty Mountain Villa won't stop you. It's not like the pharmacy hall, where you need the hall master's token. I-oh. Zhang Xiaohua thought of something and slapped her forehead. What's wrong? Zhang Xiaohu was very puzzled. Zhang Xiaohua took out the token from He Tianshu and explained, I got the token from Captain He. I was going to harass him tonight. I didn't expect to meet you like this. Looking at the time, it's too late to go there. You still want to go to the pharmacy hall? Zhang Xiaohu was puzzled. There's a strong smell of herbs there. There's nothing good there. Why do you want to go there? I think there's more qi in the pharmacy hall. Zhang Xiaohua did not hide it. Qi? In the pharmacy hall? Zhang Xiaohu was even more puzzled. He said, regulating breath and practicing qi is the same everywhere, as long as it's a quiet environment, right? Zhang Xiaohua also scratched his head and said, who knows? Anyway, I think every place is different. Zhang Xiaohu shook his head and said, it's your state of mind that's different. This was quite philosophical. However, Zhang Xiaohua did not think so much because he did experience different qi of heaven and earth. Zhang Xiaohu saw that his brother did not speak and thought that he was right. After all, he was a young man. How could he have the same state of mind as before when he just came into contact with internal strength? The 2 brothers chatted for a while before preparing to rest. Zhang Xiaohu was worried and asked, Xiaohua, does your armpit still hurt? Zhang Xiaohua patted his body and said, it's fine. It's already healed. Zhang Xiaohu was finally relieved. After entering the room, Zhang Xiaohu originally wanted to sleep side by side like the day before. However, Zhang Xiaohua thought and said, second brother, I'll stay in another room. I want to regulate my breath and practice at night. What do you think? Zhang Xiaohu happily said, okay, then don't practice too late. There's a competition tomorrow. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and agreed. They went back to their rooms. Zhang Xiaohua sat cross-legged and turned the 5 hearts to the sky. He began to practice the Heart Sutra and began to draw qi into his body. When Zhang Xiaohua released his perception, he found that the qi of heaven and earth in Zhang Xiaohu's residence was not as much as in the pharmacy hall. However, it was a little more than in the medicine field in Huanqi Villa. It was exactly as Zhang Xiaohua said. The qi of heaven and earth was different in every place. Obviously, the qi of heaven and earth in Ethereal Villa was a little richer than in Huanqi Villa. The night's practice passed quickly. When it was dawn again, Zhang Xiaohua checked the zhenqi in his meridians. There was still no obvious change. However, this was not beyond Zhang Xiaohua's expectation. Outside the room, the two brothers were in good spirits. Zhang Xiaohu also completely got rid of yesterday's decadence, making people feel as if he was a different person. Zhang Xiaohua was also completely relieved. Zhang Xiaohua asked, "Second brother, will you still accompany me to the competition today?" Zhang Xiaohu patted him on the shoulder and said, "Of course, why not?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled happily. The two brothers arrived at Kitty Hawk Hall together. The number of arenas in the square had not decreased, and the number of disciples below the arenas had not decreased. However, many of the disciples had excited smiles on their faces and were talking to each other. After watching the second round of the competition, many of them did not have much of a psychological burden. It was not like the first round, where the results of the competition were related to whether they could advance or not. Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu came to the fighting ring where the competition took place a few days ago. Not long after, they saw Leader Cheng come over with a smile and greet the disciples below the ring. Then, he took out a few number plates and distributed them to the disciples who entered the second round. When Zhang Xiaohua received the number plates, he could not help but be surprised. He pulled on Leader Cheng's sleeve and asked, "Leader Cheng, did you give the wrong number? Why am I still number 250? Leader Cheng looked at the unpleasant number and said with a smile, "There's no mistake. You got 9 points from 9 battles and 9 draws. Among the 250 disciples, you are ranked last. If you don't take this number plate, who will take it?" Zhang Xiaohua looked helplessly at the number plate that had accompanied him for 3 days. He rubbed it hard on his body and hugged it. Then he asked, "Leader Cheng, where will I compete? Will it still be in our fighting ring?" Leader Cheng shook his head and said, "No, this second round is an elimination system. It's not fixed in the same fighting ring. Listen to the number plates. Wherever they tell you to go, you will go." Zhang Xiaohua nodded. Not long after, the second round of the competition began. Zhang Xiaohua thought that his number plate was the last and would be the same as the first round. The competition would be at the end. But just as it began, someone shouted, "Number 250, 250, where is it?" Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua did not respond, Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly raised his hand and said, "Here." The person on the other side shouted, "Quickly, this fighting ring. The competition is about to begin." Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly ran over and asked loudly, "Isn't it the last number? Why is the competition starting now?" The leader of the fighting ring sneered, "This is an elimination system, not a round-robin system. It is arranged according to the number plate to prevent disciples of similar strength from meeting each other first. For disciples like you who are slightly weaker, they will first compete with disciples who are slightly stronger. Some will be eliminated first and the truly powerful disciples will stay at the end to fight for the top 10. "Oh, so it's like that." Zhang Xiaohua understood a little. His points from the first round were there. He was the weakest, so what else could he say? After the leader finished speaking, he pointed to the fighting ring and said to Zhang Xiaohua and another disciple, "Go up. I'll go light the incense. The competition is about to begin." When the disciple heard this, he took 2 steps forward and used his qinggong. He flew up the stage like a swallow. Zhang Xiaohua looked left and right, as if he was looking for something. The leader glared at him and said, "Why aren't you going up? Do you want me to throw you up?" When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he was overjoyed. He smiled and said, "Great, then please throw me up." Chapter 182. The leader looked at Zhang Xiaohua as though he was looking at a monster and muttered, "What an idiot." Then he said angrily, "Are you going up or not?" At this moment, a voice came from behind, "Of course I'm going up." Zhang Xiaohua turned around and was overjoyed. It was really Zhang Xiaohu who was rushing over with a ladder on his back. The leader stared blankly as Zhang Xiaohu ran to the front of the stage and leaned the ladder against the side of the stage. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and nodded at the leader. She walked to the front of the ladder and walked up to the stage. When Zhang Xiaohua walked up to the stage, the leader came to his senses. He pointed at the ladder leaning against the stage and couldn't believe his eyes. He stuttered, this, in his hurry, he didn't know what he was saying. It was no wonder. Ever since he entered the Misty School, participated in the martial arts exhibition, and became the leader of the Misty School, he had never seen a Misty School disciple walk up to the stage using the ladder. The word ladder didn't exist in the minds of the Misty School disciples. The disciple on the stage also looked at everything that was happening below the stage strangely. When Zhang Xiaohua really stood in front of him, he suddenly came to a realization. He pointed at Zhang Xiaohua's nose and said, You don't know Qinggong." Zhang Xiaohua nodded solemnly and said in all seriousness, "Yes, I haven't learned Qinggong yet." The disciple's lips curled into a contemptuous smile. After the two of them greeted each other, without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to prepare, the disciple rushed forward and attacked with his fist. Zhang Xiaohua was also shocked. She even forgot to use the ethereal steps and only knew to raise her fist to meet the attack. A few days ago, in the first 9 matches of the martial arts exhibition, Zhang Xiaohua usually used the fist of the Big Dipper to attack and ethereal steps to dodge. Therefore, it was always a draw. But today, she was caught off guard by her opponent's attack. She naturally reacted by using the fist of the Big Dipper that she was most familiar with. The fist of the Big Dipper only had 36 defensive moves. In the past, Zhang Xiaohua felt that there weren't many defensive moves. Ever since she learned the ethereal steps, most of her defensive moves were dodging using the ethereal steps. But this time, she was forced to only use the fist of the Big Dipper. Only after half an incense's time did Zhang Xiaohua wake up from her opponent's continuous attacks. Just as she was about to slide and use the ethereal steps, a thought suddenly appeared in her mind. If she only used the fist of the Big Dipper, how long could she last? Zhang Xiaohua wanted to know the difference between her fist of the Big Dipper and other people's fist techniques. Therefore, she abandoned the ethereal steps and focused on using the fist of the Big Dipper. A person's potential was forced out. In the beginning, Zhang Xiaohua was clumsy left and right. She blocked left and right and was very passive. She could only counterattack once in 10 moves. There were a few times when she was hit by her opponent's rough skin and flesh. She almost fell down. There was a time when she almost fell off the stage. When the disciple saw that his attacks were effective, he put in more effort in his attacks. He wasn't stingy with his internal energy. After half an incense stick's time, Zhang Xiaohua gradually adapted to her opponent's attacks. Gradually, she began to counterattack. The fist of the Big Dipper originally had many offensive moves. In the past few days, her opponents had avoided her and didn't show the power of the fist of the Big Dipper. Her opponent's attacks in this incense stick's time was like a baptism for her fist technique. It allowed Zhang Xiaohua to grow. Her strength and moves became more coordinated and subtle. In the past, Zhang Xiaohua did not know the difference between a competition and practice. He only put himself at the end of the practice in the competition, and did not know how to control his strength. When he attacked, most of his strength hit empty air, and his fist was full of vigor, but it could not do anything to his opponent. But today, in the competition, the sound of the wind on Zhang Xiaohua's fist was getting smaller and smaller, and his strength was gradually restrained. At the same time, because Zhang Xiaohua's control of his strength had become more and more precise, the situation when he collided with his opponent had also changed. Previously, Zhang Xiaohua only relied on his strength, and many of his attacks missed. The opponent's internal strength on his fist could easily attack Zhang Xiaohua's fist, forcing Zhang Xiaohua to have no choice but to dodge. But now, his strength was also controlled inside his fist, and he was able to resist his opponent's internal strength. It was as if he had built a dam in his fist or meridians, firmly preventing the internal strength from invading. This was only one aspect. In addition, in the competition, Zhang Xiaohua didn't use many moves of the Fist of the North Star. The changes between the moves were very obscure. After all, Zhang Xiaohua only practiced the Fist of the North Star from beginning to end in a set. Her experience in fighting against her opponent was still very little. But today's baptism really helped Zhang Xiaohua. The changes in the moves of the Fist of the North Star gradually became smoother and smoother. Various kinds of moves were constantly at her fingertips. Although there were constantly repetitive moves, even these repetitive moves had different uses. They were far more powerful than a few days ago. The leader below the stage was also slightly surprised. Zhang Xiaohua's result was the worst in the second round. Her opponent's standard was average. He originally thought that Zhang Xiaohua would be able to last for an incense stick's worth of time. But seeing that the second incense stick was already half burnt, Zhang Xiaohua became braver and braver as the battle went on, gradually turning the situation around. The one who was the most surprised was Zhang Xiaohu. After all, he understood Zhang Xiaohua the most. Moreover, he had been watching Zhang Xiaohua's matches for the past few days. At the beginning, when he saw that Zhang Xiaohua was beaten silly by her opponent, she actually forgot her specialty, ethereal steps. He was secretly worried that if she wasn't careful, Zhang Xiaohua would be kicked off the stage by her opponent. He secretly prayed in his heart that she should hurry up and use the ethereal steps. Hurry up and use the ethereal steps. Hurry up and use the ethereal steps. However, Zhang Xiaohua's performance was beyond his expectations. Not only did she not use the ethereal steps, she only used the Fist of the North Star to face her opponent. Just like a bamboo in a rainstorm, no matter how heavy the rain was, it could only slightly bend her waist. As long as the rain did not decrease, she would immediately straighten her back. Although Zhang Xiaohu was not an internal force expert, his understanding of fist techniques was far greater than Zhang Xiaohua's. He gradually became more familiar with fist techniques. Gradually, he began to understand. His sharp senses felt that Zhang Xiaohua's control of the Fist of the North Star was becoming more and more precise. Zhang Xiaohu could not help but nod his head. Battles were indeed the best way to grow. On the stage, Zhang Xiaohua's opponent became more and more alarmed as he fought. The situation of the battle was beginning to spiral out of his control. Moreover, the inner force in his body was almost exhausted. After all, he was only a disciple of the Misty School's Kitty Hawk Hall. He had just attained the first rank of Cotton Robe, so how could he have any profound inner force? He stole a glance at the second incense stick under the stage. It was already more than half. Thinking about how he had spent so much time facing his worst opponent, how would he face his future opponents? Moreover, he also noticed that Zhang Xiaohua's fists were beginning to slow down. Her forehead was also covered in sweat. He knew that Zhang Xiaohua was also at the end of her tether and was gradually losing her strength. In fact, when comparing inner force to physical strength, inner force naturally had the upper hand. Not only was there a lot of techniques in the use of inner force, it could be used to attack flexibly, but physical strength could only be controlled. Inner force could be tempered through the veins, the deeper it became, but physical strength was not easy to increase. Most importantly, inner force could be quickly recovered through the regulation of inner force cultivation methods, but physical strength recovery was not easy. At this moment, he could not help but regret. If he had put in more effort to cultivate his inner force, Zhang Xiaohua would have run out of strength and he would have been able to win easily. Just as he was thinking, he had forced Zhang Xiaohua into a corner. Zhang Xiaohua was also gasping for air, as if she was about to sit on the ground. Thus, he was delighted. He took a deep breath and secretly channeled the last bit of inner force in his veins. With a wave of his hands, he covered Zhang Xiaohua's body with his palms and attacked Zhang Xiaohua. He believed that in such a small corner, whether it was attacking or defending, Zhang Xiaohua would inevitably come into contact with his palms. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's appearance, his last bit of inner force should be the straw that broke the camel's back. He looked forward to the clash of fists and palms, as if he could already see the dawn of victory. Moreover, just as his palms were about to hit Zhang Xiaohua, he suddenly felt his vision blur and he had actually lost sight of Zhang Xiaohua's figure. But he had already used up all his inner force and his inner force hit empty air. His body was already out of control. He had already forced Zhang Xiaohua to the corner of the stage, and when he reached the edge of the stage, when Zhang Xiaohua dodged, he had already reached the edge of the stage. The forward momentum brought him out of the stage and he cursed in his heart. He immediately gathered his qi and wanted to use his qing gong to return to the stage. But now, his meridians were like a thief leaving a building, empty. There was not an ounce of inner force that he could use. He could only watch helplessly as he fell off the stage. He heard two plop, plop sounds and Zhang Xiaohua's opponent had thrown himself off the stage. As for Zhang Xiaohua, she had also used up all her strength and sat down on the stage. It was a close call just now. Her opponent had used all his might and Zhang Xiaohua indeed did not have any extra strength to block it. Unfortunately, although Zhang Xiaohua's strength was not enough to block that palm which was filled with inner force, she was still able to use ethereal steps. Hence, Zhang Xiaohua used the last of her strength and used ethereal steps to flash behind her opponent. At this moment, below the stage, the second incense stick had just been extinguished. The leader looked at the two people who had fallen off the stage and announced, "Number 250 wins." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he happily ran to the side of the stage. Zhang Xiaohua, who was on the stage, was also unusually excited. But he raised his hand with great difficulty and still stood up weakly. Zhang Xiaohu walked along the escalator and carried Zhang Xiaohua down with a pained heart. He brought her to the side to rest. Luckily, there was still some time before the second round of the competition and they could let the competing disciples rest. Otherwise, with Zhang Xiaohua's condition, she could only admit defeat. As mentioned previously, the recovery of inner force was through regulating one's breathing. At this moment, there were quite a number of contestants who were sitting cross-legged. They were using this gap in the competition to quickly circulate their inner force to recover as much inner force as possible. As for Zhang Xiaohua, seeing that others were regulating their breathing, Zhang Xiaohu said to Zhang Xiaohua, who was sitting on the ground paralyzed, "Xiaohua, you don't have any strength left. What are you going to do next? Why don't you rest here and I'll go see where you are competing? We'll just admit defeat. Anyway, you have already won a match just now and it has long exceeded our expectations. I thought you would be beaten down in half an incense stick's time." Zhang Xiaohua tried her best to move her legs and said, "Wait a little longer. Let's see how much strength I can recover." Zhang Xiaohua could feel that her strength was slowly recovering, but this speed was far from enough. She estimated that by the time the other party finished regulating their breathing and was ready to go on stage, her strength would not even be half recovered. What should she do? Just as he was panicking, his mind lit up as he thought of something. He struggled to help Zhang Xiaohu stand up and slowly took up the horse stance. He slowly began to execute the Big Dipper mystical fist. Zhang Xiaohu was stunned and quickly stopped him. "What are you doing? Xiaohua, you're already so tired. Why don't you rest more and try to recover more strength? Why are you still practicing the fist technique?" Zhang Xiaohua said weakly, "Second brother, don't worry about me. I think this will help me recover my strength." It turned out that Zhang Xiaohua wanted to use the usual method of practicing the fist of the North Star to recover her strength. However, on one hand, Zhang Xiaohua had never used this method to recover her strength before, so she did not know if it would work. On the other hand, she had just practiced the Fist of the North Star to the 3rd level and needed 7 consecutive times to flow. In this short period of time, she did not know if it was enough for her to finish 7 times. In any case, if she simply waited here, she would definitely not be able to recover her strength and would only end up admitting defeat. But if she practiced the Fist of the North Star, there might be a glimmer of hope. For this glimmer of hope, Zhang Xiaohua was willing to gamble. Seeing that all the disciples who were regulating their breathing had stood up and walked towards the arena, the people in the arena had also started calling out numbers. Zhang Xiaohua had just slowly practiced the 2nd round. When Zhang Xiaohua was about to perform the last move of the 2nd round, a shout came from the arena, "Number 250, number 250. Zhang Xiaohua wanted to give up, but Zhang Xiaohu also shouted from the side, "Xiaohua, they've already called you." Zhang Xiaohua gritted his teeth and said, "Second brother, go and delay for a while." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he looked at him, then looked at the arena, and hurriedly ran over. However, Zhang Xiaohua was already in despair. It was still far from the 7th round. How could second brother delay for so long? However, Zhang Xiaohua did not want to give up. He gritted his teeth and started practicing the Fist of the North Star for the 3rd time. However, when he performed the first move, that familiar, longing, and long-awaited life-saving flow was produced from his left toe. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. He immediately produced a kind of power from his body. He used all his strength to practice the Fist of the North Star, driving the flow throughout his bones. The flow was like a nourishing elixir. Every time it flowed through a bone, it would drive the flesh and muscles connected to the bone, restoring their vitality. After a total of 108 moves were completed, Zhang Xiaohua had recovered all the strength in his body. Moreover, he could faintly feel that his flesh and blood were filled with vitality, as if his strength had increased by a bit. Zhang Xiaohua could not help but be greatly puzzled. Could this be the legendary, break and then rebuild? However, at this time, there was no time left for him to think. He quickly ran into the arena. That nimble figure of his was not the same as the one who was paralyzed on the ground half a moment ago. When Zhang Xiaohua ran to the arena where a quarrel was going on, Zhang Xiaohu was carrying Fu Tai and begging the leader. The leader did not buy it and said, "I don't care if you are the sect leader's direct disciple or not. Even the sect leader himself has to abide by the rules of the martial arts exhibition. I have already waited half a minute, and now it's time. Now, please move aside. I want to announce that the number 250 disciple has forfeited." Zhang Xiaohu pulled the leader's sleeve and said something. Zhang Xiaohua loudly shouted, "Second brother, I'm here." Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly said to the leader, "Okay, my little brother is here. There's no need to announce that he has forfeited." The leader looked at Zhang Xiaohua who ran in front of him and asked, "Where did you go? It's already time. You are looking down on the rules of the martial arts exhibition." Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly scowled and said, "Leader, I ate too much yesterday. I need to go to the toilet, I need to go to the toilet. Please forgive me." The leader laughed out loud. "Just now, your second brother said you used up all your strength and needed to rest. You said you need to go to the toilet. Which one do I believe?" Zhang Xiaohua rubbed his hands and said, "I believe all of them. I believe all of them." The leader smiled and waved his hand. "Fortunately, you haven't exceeded the time limit. Otherwise, even if I believe all of them, you would still forfeit. Hurry up and go up. If you don't go up, I will really consider you as the loser." Hearing this, the first to move was not Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohu quickly ran to the front of the arena. He first placed the escalator on the side of the arena. Only then did Zhang Xiaohua quickly walk up the arena. The leader and Zhang Xiaohua's opponent cursed again. What kind of contestants were these? The contestants who entered the second round could be said to be the best of the Misty School's Kitty Hawk Hall. They were outstanding in all aspects such as internal energy, qigong, fist techniques, palm techniques, and so on. They were even extremely experienced in competition. As a result, Zhang Xiaohua's second-round contestant had not fought with Zhang Xiaohua for more than half an incense stick's worth of time. She took the initiative to attack, passively defend, and then constantly wandered around. She had changed several battle strategies. On the other hand, Zhang Xiaohua had tasted the sweetness of going on the offensive. He only blindly attacked. Every move was forward, and every punch was aimed at the flesh. Although Zhang Xiaohua was still on the offensive this time, it was different from the previous time. As he fought, he tried different ways to control his strength, and combined real moves with feints. The previous tough fight had really benefited him a lot, as he had tried the essence of the fight. Now, he was constantly improving, and he was able to handle it with ease. It was still the same 108 moves, but now, it had turned something rotten into something magical, and the repeated moves were also ingenious. For a while, he was evenly matched with the opponent who was above average in strength, and even seemed to have the upper hand. Zhang Xiaohua's opponent was in a predicament. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua's number plate, he naturally knew that she was the worst disciple in the second round today. Moreover, she was walking on the escalator. She did not even know qigong, yet she was able to enter the second round. This was an anomaly. When they started fighting, he attacked, while Zhang Xiaohua defended freely. When he relaxed a little, Zhang Xiaohua attacked like rain, making him feel that he could not withstand it. Also, Zhang Xiaohua's fists were very heavy. With one look, one could tell that she was a master of great strength. Naturally, he would not easily fight her head-on. Therefore, he wandered around again, attempting to use the weakness of Zhang Xiaohua's lack of qigong to exhaust Zhang Xiaohua's strength. When they fought until the end, when Zhang Xiaohua was exhausted, he would deal the fatal blow. Please add it to your collection, thank you. Chapter 183. Zhang Xiaohua's opponent, that little abacus was loud and clear. A person's strength was sometimes exhausted and naturally could not last long. Zhang Xiaohua was naturally no exception. However, this endurance was different from person to person. Zhang Xiaohua's previous match was because she had used too much strength at the beginning. In the end, she almost died. In this match, naturally, she was very careful in the distribution of strength. Seeing that the opponent was blindly wandering, she used even more feints. From the beginning of the match, there were 7 real moves and 3 feints. Later on, there were 7 feints and 3 real moves. In the end, there were 10 feints. Since you are not attacking, why should I go all out? In addition, Zhang Xiaohua had just practiced the Big Dipper magical fist. Her body was full of strength and was stronger than when she first went on stage. How could this kind of state be exhausted in 2 or 3 incense sticks? Thus, on the stage, there was a scene that made Zhang Xiaohua incredulous. Zhang Xiaohua actually chased her opponent around the stage. Although people with discerning eyes could see clearly that this was called a wandering tactic, like a swallow shuttling back and forth on the stage, avoiding Zhang Xiaohua's fists. Her figure was also beautiful, but after all, she was defending. Her momentum was weaker and the situation was not good. Zhang Xiaohua did not show off her qigong footwork. Compared to her opponent, she was clumsy. However, she seemed to be unskilled and had a valiant taste. In this way, the two of them fought as they walked. As they walked, they fought for nearly an incense stick's worth of time. Although qigong did not require much internal strength, it still consumed internal strength. Otherwise, Zhang Xiaohua would have practiced qigong long ago. After an incense stick's worth of time, the disciple who was competing with Zhang Xiaohua was already sweating on his back. On the other hand, Zhang Xiaohua was also panting heavily. The disciple was happy when he saw this. His strategy had begun to work and Zhang Xiaohua had expended a lot of energy. Originally, when the disciple saw that more than half the time had passed, he thought that if his strategy didn't have any obvious effect, he would change his method of attack. However, when he saw that Zhang Xiaohua's footsteps had slowed down, he couldn't help but feel happy. He took a deep breath and circulated the internal energy in his meridians. His body became even faster and he continued to move. He firmly believed that Zhang Xiaohua could only hold on for half an incense stick of time. When Zhang Xiaohua ran out of strength, it would be the time for him to pick the fruits of victory. Sure enough, Zhang Xiaohua did not disappoint. Her footsteps became heavier and her breathing became heavier. The disciple patiently waited for half an incense stick's worth of time. When he calculated that it was about time, he let out a long whistle and stopped his flying steps. He laughed and said, "Idiot, you've been fooled. Watch me." After saying that, he turned around and leaped up. His left and right legs kept changing, alternating between kicking at Zhang Xiaohua. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she grinned, revealing her white teeth. Her footsteps no longer moved. Her legs were slightly separated and she lowered her waist. She was actually in a horse stance. She raised her fist and punched towards the shadow of the leg that was flying towards her. Peng, peng, peng. There were a few consecutive sounds, like the sound of leather being beaten. The shadow of the leg that was filled with internal energy collided with Zhang Xiaohua's fist that was filled with strength. Zhang Xiaohua's body was as steady as a mountain. She didn't move at all. The shadow of the leg was like flowing water that hit a pillar. After several impacts, it didn't have any effect. When the disciple retracted his body and stood firmly on the spot, his legs couldn't help but tremble slightly. He actually felt pain in his legs. On the opposite side, Zhang Xiaohua also loosened her fists and swung her hands. It should be the same feeling as her opponent. The disciple looked at Zhang Xiaohua and said in surprise, "You still have the strength to receive my shadowless kick? You didn't use much strength just now." Zhang Xiaohua chuckled. Her face looked harmless and said, "You guess? You guess? Why don't you guess?" After speaking, she didn't wait for the disciple to reply. She leaned forward and raised her fist to attack the disciple's chest. The disciple thought it was a feint and wanted to dodge. But when the fist got close to him, it contained strength and the wind from the fist was biting cold. The disciple's face changed and he immediately raised his palm to meet the fist. When the fist and palm met, his body swayed. Only then did he know that Zhang Xiaohua had used all her strength. When Zhang Xiaohua saw that her fist was blocked, she didn't stop. She closed in with another move, forcing the disciple to immediately receive the attack. He couldn't even move. The disciple made a move and every move fell behind. Zhang Xiaohua also took advantage of her strength to bully others. She pressed forward with her fists, forcing the disciple to use all his strength to deal with each move. Zhang Xiaohua's fist technique had been honed over this period of time, and was no longer as inexperienced as before. Even if Nie Xiao were to fight now, he would not be a match for Zhang Xiaohua just by relying on his previous 4 ounces against 1,000 jin. Furthermore, this disciple's internal energy was even more incomparable to Nie Xiao's. Zhang Xiaohua's arms now had an unknown amount of strength, but it was enough to deal with him. Therefore, in the last half an incense stick's time, the disciple was really suppressed by Zhang Xiaohua. He couldn't even take half a move. The disciple was angry. He thought that he had set a trap for Zhang Xiaohua to jump into, but he didn't know that Zhang Xiaohua would beat him at his own game. Instead, he fell into his trap. The 36 stratagems, he still hadn't studied them thoroughly. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was proudly attacking and enjoying the pleasure of her plan, her opponent was endlessly regretting and had to use all his strength to deal with her. Then, she heard a shout from below the stage, "Time's up. Stop." Zhang Xiaohua immediately jumped up in joy and shouted to Zhang Xiaohu below the stage, "Second brother, ha 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 ha, another draw, another draw." But that disciple's face was ashen as he hung his head dejectedly. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was satisfied with this draw and was about to walk down the stage, the leader below the stage announced, "Number 250 wins." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and asked in shock, "Leader, wasn't there a draw? So I'm the winner?" That leader didn't have time to waste on her and waved his hand, saying, "I said you won, so you won. What's with all this nonsense? Why aren't you going to rest and prepare for the next round of competition?" After saying that, he called for another pair of contestants to go up the stage to compete. Zhang Xiaohua resentfully jumped down the stage and pulled a youth who was watching from the side. She heartlessly asked, "This brother, how do you think I won?" That youth coldly asked, "What's your surname?" Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and said, "My surname is Zhang." Then she asked, "What does this have to do with my victory?" That youth said, "It has nothing to do with your victory or defeat, but my surname is not Zhang. Please don't call me brother. It won't be too late for you to call me that when my surname is Zhang in my next life." Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but silently criticize, "Why are the children these days all like this? Rebellious, generation gap. My surname might not even be Zhang in my next life." Then she smiled mischievously and said, "Let's not talk about names first. Can you tell me why I won?" That youth looked at her with disdain and said, "Actually, your martial arts might not be as good as Senior Gao's." "Oh," Zhang Xiaohua said, "it's the one who fought with me just now." That youth was surprised, "When you were bowing just now, he didn't say anything?" Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head and said, "Maybe, I forgot." That youth was even more annoyed and said, "Senior Gao knows that you don't know Qigong and internal energy, so he wanted to first exhaust your strength. When you're out of strength, then he'll deal with you. Unfortunately, he miscalculated and didn't exhaust your strength. On the contrary, he was the one who first fought with you, then was suppressed by you and fell into a disadvantageous position. If he fought with all his strength from the beginning, the outcome might not be known, but at least he wouldn't be at a disadvantage and be judged as a failure by the leader." Zhang Xiaohua was even more confused and said, "It's clearly a draw, why did you say it was a failure?" That youth frowned and said, "Do you really not know, or are you pretending not to know? The second round of the martial arts exhibition is an elimination system. There's only victory and defeat, no draws. If there's no winner after 2 incense sticks of time, then the disadvantaged disciple on the stage will be judged as the loser." Zhang Xiaohua suddenly realized that there was such a rule. That youth continued to explain, "Senior Gao fought with you in the beginning, so it couldn't be considered a disadvantage. As long as he defeated you, this wouldn't be a problem. But in the end, he was suppressed by you. His fighting with you in the beginning proved that he was passive. In the end, it was a draw, so naturally you were judged as the winner. You're very lucky, don't be beaten badly when you practice martial arts." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she looked up to the sky and laughed, saying, "Ha ha ha, character is a problem." When that youth saw this, he hurriedly took a few steps away with an expression that said, "I don't know him." Zhang Xiaohu was also listening to the side. He smiled and congratulated Zhang Xiaohua. "Xiaohua, congratulations, you're really lucky to pass another round." Zhang Xiaohua stopped laughing and said to Zhang Xiaohu, "Let's go, second brother, let's rest on the side, there's still a competition later." Thus, the 2 brothers returned to the previous place. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua sit down, Zhang Xiaohu was a bit puzzled and asked, "Xiaohua, you're not using your Big Dipper magical fist anymore?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Second brother, I'm not tired at all. After a little rest, I'll be able to recover my strength. Just now, don't think that I was forcing him to fight on the stage. I only used my strength in the last few moments. At the very beginning, I was just using my flowery frame to fool him." At this time, they heard a dang sound from the side. Zhang Xiaohua and his brother turned around to look. Wasn't it the disciple who was fighting with Zhang Xiaohua on the stage? He must have heard Zhang Xiaohua's words and fainted on the ground. The 2 brothers stayed outside the stage, chatting while paying attention to the movements inside the stage. After a while, the competition inside the stage ended. Many disciples also came over to sit down and rest, adjusting their internal strength. After another period of time, the third round of the competition began. As the number was called, the disciples outside the stage gradually walked into the stage. However, Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu did not hear the unpleasant number being called. Even after a long time had passed, Zhang Xiaohua and the others did not hear it. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua shouted, "Oh no, second brother, this competition will be considered as forfeiting if we don't see it. Could it be that we didn't hear it? Don't lose the opportunity for nothing." Zhang Xiaohu was also anxious and said, "I didn't hear it either. I guess we missed it. Let's quickly go in and look for it." However, on the stage, there seemed to be a competition, and no one was waiting for anyone. Zhang Xiaohua was anxious and said, "Second brother, it seems that we really missed it. They didn't wait for us at all. Sigh, it wasn't easy to enter the third round, why did we forfeit? I don't know who benefited from it." Zhang Xiaohu said, "But we also paid attention. We really didn't hear the number 250 being called. This number sounds very unpleasant, so there's no reason not to hear it." Zhang Xiaohua was also puzzled and said, "Yes, I think so too." At this time, they just happened to pass by a stage. Zhang Xiaohua pulled the leader and asked, "Martial uncle, can I ask why I didn't hear my number being called? What's going on?" The leader was focused on the competition in the stage and did not have the time to pay attention to him. He said absent-mindedly, "You lost, so naturally they didn't call you." Zhang Xiaohua said, "I didn't lose. The leader said that I won." The leader said casually, "Then it means that you didn't hear it. It's considered forfeiting. You're unlucky." Zhang Xiaohua wanted to cry and said, but, I really didn't hear it." Zhang Xiaohu also chimed in, "Yes, I also paid attention. I really didn't hear it." The leader slightly turned his face and said, "I don't have time. You should ask Steward Su." Steward Su. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he immediately came to a realization. He pulled Zhang Xiaohu and ran towards the largest stage in the field. Sure enough, from afar, he saw Steward Su watching the competition with great interest. Zhang Xiaohua walked closer and saluted, "Steward Su." Steward Su looked at the youth and didn't seem to recognize him. He couldn't help but ask, "You're from Fledgling Eagle Hall. Why haven't I seen you before?" Zhang Xiaohua carefully explained, that, "Steward Su, I'm from Huanxi Manor." Oh, Steward Su understood and said with a smile, "I know. You were sent by Huanxi Manor to participate in the martial arts exhibition. Hee, how was it? The martial arts exhibition wasn't bad, right? The second round of the competition was much more exciting than the first round. What do you think?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled apologetically and said, "Yes, it was really exciting. The level was very high." Steward Su said proudly, "Of course. Which disciple of our Misty School's Fledgling Eagle Hall isn't a dragon or phoenix among men? However, it's also not bad that you can participate in the first round of the competition. Regardless of the outcome, the most important thing is to participate. The competition is second, friendship is first. The friendship between Misty School and Huanxi Manor will last forever. Oh right, you really have time. There's nothing going on at Huanxi Manor and you can actually go from the first round to the second round." Zhang Xiaohua knew that Steward Su had misunderstood and explained, "It's like this. Steward Su, I also entered the second round." Ah! Steward Su's eyeballs almost fell to the ground and said, "What did you say? You entered the second round?" Then he seemed to think of something and said, "Oh, you're really not bad. However, the second round is full of elites. If you lose, then you lose. Come, stay here with me and take a good look at how others compete. It will definitely be useful for you to learn from. Go back and practice martial arts well and strive to win a few more rounds next year." Zhang Xiaohua still wanted to explain and said, "It's like this. Steward Su, I have already won 2 rounds in a row just now. 2 rounds. Steward Su was stunned. He was shocked and said in disbelief, you really won 2 rounds in a row? Really? Zhang Xiaohua said with a face of certainty. It was announced by the leader. Steward Su said in disbelief, since you won 2 rounds in a row, then you should compete in the 3rd round. Why did you come to me? Zhang Xiaohua said with an innocent face, but, I just wanted to compete in the 3rd round. However, I didn't have the leader's number and I didn't know where to compete. That's why I came to find you. Ah. Steward Su also didn't understand and said, how is that possible? The 3rd round has already started and the number should have been called long ago. Oh right, what's your number? Number 250. Zhang Xiaohua didn't hesitate at all. 250. Steward Su also didn't hide it and shouted out. There are only 250 disciples who entered the 2nd round. It seems like you're the worst one. Alright, come with me. I'll go and see what's going on. Steward Su called Zhang Xiaohua and walked to the side of the stage together. There were a few tables at the side of the stage. There were many pieces of paper on the tables and a few leaders were sorting them out. Steward Su walked over and told the leaders about the matter. A leader carefully flipped through the pieces of paper and took one out. He looked at it and said a few words to Steward Su. Steward Su looked at the piece of paper and looked at Zhang Xiaohua with a strange expression. Then, he returned the piece of paper to the leader and walked back with a smile. Zhang Xiaohua quickly went up and asked, Steward Su, did I miss it? I really didn't want to miss it. Was the leader's voice too soft? You can't blame me. Steward Su smiled and said, you didn't miss it. The leader's voice wasn't soft either. It's just that the leader didn't call your name at all. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said anxiously, that's not right. I won the 2nd round and the leader personally announced it. Although it's a tie, I have the advantage. There's no reason to not let me participate in the 3rd round. Steward Su smiled and said, it's not what you think. Congratulations, number 250. You've successfully entered the 4th round. 4th round. Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled and said, but I haven't participated in the 3rd round. Steward Su saw that Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and explained, you got a bye in the 3rd round and directly entered the 4th round. Bye. Zhang Xiaohua was even more puzzled and asked, what's a bye? A bye means I don't have to compete. When Steward Su heard this, he thought to himself, what kind of level is this? He doesn't know anything and his luck is quite good. Sigh, I can only teach him a lesson. In the 2nd round, there are a total of 250 disciples. In the 1st round, there are an even number, so you can catch pairs to compete with each other. In the 2nd round, there are a total of 125 pairs, which is an odd number, so you can't catch pairs to compete with each other. Therefore, there is a disciple who doesn't need to compete with each other and can directly enter the 3rd round. This is called a bye. In the 3rd round, there are still 63 disciples, so there must be a disciple who doesn't need to compete with each other and can directly enter the 4th round. Zhang Xiaohua exclaimed, there's such a thing. My character can't be that good. Otherwise, the 4th and 5th round would be a bye. Steward Su shook his head and said, the 4th round has 32 people. It's an even number and naturally there's no need for a bye. The 5th round has 16 disciples and doesn't need to compete anymore. Even if it's a competition, there's no need for a bye.